Whoever said late don't draw. That's pretty funny. All right, I got yappers in my ears. I got to take out my headphones real quick. All right, guys. Yeah, I normally just talk to chat for a while, but since we got some guests here, let's just let's run through it real quick, and I'll introduce my guests and all that stuff. And let's get started here. Okay, so every 2 weeks, I give you guys a new challenge in my Discord, and this week was a little bit different. I challenge you guys to a composition challenge. And what that is, I'll explain in a second here, but that's kind of hitting my level of skill. That's hitting the cap of my knowledge. I'm not sure I feel completely comfortable critiquing that stuff just yet. I'm still learning it, and I participated in this challenge too. So I brought on my two teachers over here. Here, I'm going to put on the headphones so I can hear the yap machines. All right, that is these guys. Right over here, this is Devin, Korwin, and Ramon, Hurtado. Do you guys want to... You guys want to introduce yourselves over here? Ramon, do you want to talk? Start?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Ramon. I'm a painter, teacher, cat dad. Been doing this for quite a bit of time now. Let's see. I think that's all I got.
Well, what about the? Have you ever done any composition before?
Yes, actually, I just finished this thing back here. This is a painting of Augustus Caesar visiting the tomb of Alexander the Great. I've got the mannequin and like the Roman armor and the props and all the stuff for the painting behind me. So yeah, and Devin and I have been like teaching composition for a while as well. So yeah, I've gotten my toes wet.
Awesome. All right, Devin, what about yourself? You got an elevator pitch for us?
No, I've never done composition before.
Yeah, what is that?
You guys are tanking this. Don't make me share your screen.
Yeah, I am a concept artist and illustrator. I guess mostly illustrator now. And I started the art school under Paint Academy. I've been teaching for a long time now. Yeah, does that sum it up?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, Devin is a really great concept artist, and these are the two guys that taught me how to draw and paint. Ramon a lot, and Devin was like my first. Devin was like my first link into like this whole world, and then he recommended me to Ramon. So that's how I got started, actually.
Introduced him into the whole.
Yeah. Devin showed up with a trench coat and was like, "Hey kid, you want some art?"
Yeah, it's honestly not that far off. Like, let's get you away from this Watt stuff. All right, let me show you the good stuff.
How did you find me to begin with?
I was an Instagram demon back in the day. I think that's all it is. Just follow a lot of people on Instagram. Honestly,
it's
I don't
triangulating your location based on your posts.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's why you're hanging out outside the window.
Yeah.
A pair of eyes in the bushes.
So this is a composition on Romeo and Juliet. That is the theme for the topic here. Have you guys ever have either of you ever read Romeo and Juliet? Or seen it?
A long time ago.
Yeah, I watched the Baz Luhrmann one recently.
Okay. All right, so we got two people who've never I've never read it. Ramon, a little bit familiar, and Devin.
Well,
Devin's actually.
I'm not an expert. Let's not.
Yeah, Devin's actually a Shakespearean actor in his spare time.
Yeah.
I
We care a lot more about we care a lot more about the painting here than I think the accurate storytelling. No one's gonna get disqualified for making it 3 hours, too late in time. So yeah. I guess let's start like right from the beginning. Ramon, do you want to tell us like what is composition? Like why does anyone care about like making a composition or like making a painting or a compositional sketch?
Sure. So the thing is that like when you start, you know, let's say like before you even like pick up like a brush or a pencil or whatever, right? Like as a person, we deal in stories, right? Like stories are the kind of containers that we use to, you know, sort of transmit ideas to other people, right? And pretty much even like what you tell yourself about your own life is a story of some kind, right? And I think as kids, we're very much like encouraged to play and to, you know, let our imagination run wild and to be curious about things and all that, right? And I think that's the initial draw for people, you know, pun intended. But sometimes, let's say that, you know, you are lucky enough to be encouraged in, you know, art making, you know, in your upbringing. The thing is that like when you start to learn like, you know, you start to learn like how to measure, you know, you start to learn about like anatomy or perspective or whatever else, it's really easy to get sucked into that and to lose sight of why you got into this in the first place, right? And so it just becomes like a chore. It just becomes this like, you know, endless array of things that you could learn, but the impetus to learn it is lost because you forgot why you were learning it, right? You're learning it to tell stories of whatever kind is meaningful to you.
Also, like you look up composition and you find math, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna put that off until, you know, I'm done with every other fundamental.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just study anatomy for 3 years and never think about composition because you see like golden means or something.
Yeah, that's true. It's like it becomes
the,
like comfortable to like get stuck like just studying or being like an anatomy nerd or whatever.
Yeah. I remember like it was like, okay, composition is this kind of esoteric thing where
Da Vinci Code like this.
Yeah, and it's also like there's so many things I can't do, so why even like why dive into that? And I think like the big mental shift is that no, composition is like where you start. It's everything. It's the beginning and the end, the alpha, the omega,
the sigma.
The sigma.
Yeah, like composition is basically how you design an experience for someone else to have, right? So like how you take all of these elements of like, you know, perspective and like, you know, viewpoint and color and drawing and like whatever, like all the nerd shit, like how you take all of that stuff and actually make something out of it so that someone else will care about that, right?
Yeah,
and that could just be for you or it could be for somebody else.
It's really where you get to express yourself. And if you think about the word composition, like composing in the musical sense, I like to think of it now like Beethoven huddled over his piano, like with the moody candelabra going. It's where you like write your sheet music, and that's kind of what you can be known for as an artist, is like your compositions. I think thinking of it in like a musical sense makes it you know, you realize like how important composition is. Like it's everything actually.
Sweet. Let me sorry, you can finish up, Ramon. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say like, and that's also why like what ends up happening is that like you have something greater to aspire to. Like you have a more important thing to do when you're composing. So you're not hyper focused on just like, oh, did I get all the tendons and like the, you know, forearm right?
Do anything without like.
Yeah.
Also, like, even if you're not thinking about composition is thinking about you. Like, you're always doing composition, whether you realize it or not, because composition is making a decision about a relationship. So if you open your sketchbook and you make a line inside your sketchbook, well, there's like the width and the height of the sketchbook, and that line that you make relates to that boundary. Therefore, you've just made a decision about a relationship, and that's composition. So the way I like to define it is decision-making about relationships. And anytime I say like, no, I want this instead of that, you know, you're composing something.
Composition is in the room with us right now.
Oh no, don't turn around. Okay, sweet. Yeah, let me show off some of the stuff. Oh, that's him. And the guy kind of wrapped up in duct tape. I don't know what's going on behind you, but I'm a little bit scared. Let me show off.
Let's not talk about that.
All of I'm switching wrong. Let me show off all of our submissions here. I think we probably had maybe about 30 or so. Let me throw this up. I think we had about 30 submissions, a ton of different sketches. So like the theme here is Romeo and Juliet, but you know it's much more so about like how do you take this is the wrong channel even. All right. How do you take a something that you might not even care about or know that much about, and actually like turn it into something that's interesting to you, and make like an interesting image, and like practice those design skills. So, I mean, do you guys want to just hop into it? Do we want to start like pulling some of these? I think the way that we should do it is really start from the beginning and like work, maybe pick a couple that fit like the most fundamental, like the most general level of advice. Like, how do we approach composition? How do we approach, like coming up with an idea? Is there any of those that?
Sure.
Yeah, you guys see?
Yeah, let me fire up Photoshop. Actually, I forgot to start it over here.
Let me buy Photoshop real quick.
yeah. Let me pirate Photoshop real quick.
Let me just buy.
Why are you guys buying Adobe products?
Buy Photoshop.
We'll get to as many as we can, but I think it's best to choose ones that kind of like represent like a certain like tier of I guess like skill. I hate to call out specific people, but like these fundamental ideas, and then once we've kind of found some people that are better at like organizing shapes and stuff, then maybe we can focus on some people with some value stuff, and then maybe some higher level ideas towards the end.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll just take a second to look through here. Also, really good work, everybody. Like it's like really great to see, and like how many people submitted to. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really happy with. We got some really great ones in there, and
it's also like really like fun to like read the comments and like how scared everybody is of like composition. Like just as like a little note, like just in terms of like, I don't know, not to sound like a grifter coach, but like in terms of like mindset, like, you have to think of it like you're a kid playing with like Legos or like just little, whatever, like dolls or like little, toy like soldiers or like whatever you were into as a kid. Like whatever you did to kind of like arrange these little figures and tell yourself a little story, that's like, it's literally the same thing.
I could start real quick. I think one caught my eye. Maybe just like a real quick one.
Yeah, sure. Let me know when it's on your screen and I'll switch over to that.
Okay, should be good.
Sweet. Okay.
Oh, nice.
This okay, jelly. I'm assuming this is when Romeo, is by the balcony. Can we ask like maybe
if they're not in the chat specifically, it's going to be a little bit hard to ask. I wanted to tell people, a lot of people left like some notes or a description or whatever, but you might be.
Okay.
You might just have to wing it.
The description was, I can't find the other ones I did, so fuck it. I don't do composition anyway. I think that's all really needs to be said.
That's sick.
Okay, so I think like a couple of things that I think are done really well is number one, like having a frame to work within. I saw a few that were kind of like floating, and that goes back to the thing of like, if you're not doing composition, it's you don't think you are, you still are. So it's worth like putting a boundary around something, because then you can relate everything inside of it to the frame. Yeah, and it's all about the relationships that are happening relative to that. I like to think of it very, very simply. So ratios and this thing, gravity, basically just contrast and like where your eye goes to. I like to think of it as like gravity. So, okay, where does my eye go? And this is like the way to practice composition, is you think, what is the thing doing and what do I want it to do? So like listening to the painting, asking it, what are you telling me? And kind of being present with it. And if you have a goal in mind, you could say, well, is that close to my goal or is it not close to my goal? So for me, where are like the big planets? Planets have this gravity where they attract things around it. So number one, I see here. Number two, I see here. And number three, I see here. So here are our planets. And this is subjective, but you can make like, composition is kind of where like you can make arguments, and you can back up your arguments, and you can decide, like, is that convincing or is it not convincing? That's why it's like composition is not totally just touchy-feely nonsense, and it's also not a science. It's somewhere in between where you're making these arguments about things. So for me, I feel like it's really kind of down the line of like number one, number two, number three, there are our focal points. So generally where you place your focal points, they're going to be relative to things in the frame. And okay, now what kind of like relationship do they have to that? It's a triangle, and triangles are probably going to come back quite a lot. So I think this is something that's like being done really well in this example, is that there are an identifiable number of focal points and there's a hierarchy. And you can think of this like if you're making a poster, like a band is coming to town, you want to have an identifiable like band name, and then like location, and then the details about the time and everything. And the different ratios of this, that's going to be like the different feelings that you can create with this poster. But if they're all the same size, date and time and everything, it's just, it gets confusing. It's not engaging. You can't really tell where to look first. So again, I think something that's done really well in this is that there is like three things, like three paragraphs to your essay. And, we have a title, we have like a subheading, the location of where the band is playing. Here's like our date and time, like this little ivy over here to create some interest. Okay, so in addition to these planets where your eyes kind of go back and forth between them, there's also other gestures that are happening in this. And I think one of the main ones is like, this kind of thing. So when you identify these things, you can then reinforce them. So I think that there are some good things happening here that can just be reinforced. I wouldn't want to kind of reinvent the wheel with this. The problem, I think, is that a lot of things are very static. And the reason why they are static is because of the ratios that they're making. So for example, if you have like a canvas like this and you split it in half, well, it's totally static. But if you move that line off to right here, well, now like your eye is moving this way. There's a difference between small and big, and you get this like this contrast, which creates this motion of your eye. So something that's happening is that this triangle, you could see how static it is. It's like almost symmetrical within this frame. Also, like it's very rule of thirds-y here without really any kind of motion. Everything is like, exactly here. It's kind of hard to explain. The other thing is that these gestures, let me see here. They are tangent with the corner. Now, not literally. So what I mean is like, well, if you take the logical conclusion of this gesture, it terminates like right here at this corner. And you see like, it's not literally anything here, but your eye kind of flows that way right into the corner. The other thing is that this goes this way, again, right into the corner. So you see the shape right here, it just stops. So let's make like the modern art version of this painting. And this is a really, really useful thing to do. I'm just going to kind of color code these. And now we can see this at the Museum of Modern Art. And we still have our kind of contrast points. So let's make them a little different here. Now maybe like different color here. We can kind of do this and that'll create contrast. So, interesting painting. But again, I feel like the way that it stops at the corner, what can we do instead? Just maybe push it over a little bit. And, composition is subtle. These are like tiny little increments that you're going to be adjusting. And just doing something like this, well, it gets it away from the corner. And maybe we could have more of other things in the scene kind of flow this way and reinforce that. And maybe even like I can warp this a little bit. And if it was more like this or something, get more of like a wave shape. Now the thing is, like, are these underlying abstract things, do they make you feel the same way as the scene? And it's very subjective, but as you're working, that's your compass, and you say, yes or no. Um, okay, so yeah, I mean, I think that's mostly what I wanted to say about yeah.
You try to like really, when you're thinking about composition, you try to break everything down into like its abstraction, right?
Yes. What did I do to my answer first?
And actually, I saw somebody say something in chat that I think that you guys would be really good to address. Somebody said that they didn't do one because they're not good enough to do, you know, like a composition yet.
Yeah, like what Jelly said was, I don't do composition. Well, this is composition. It's a great composition. The thing I think that you can do is just, you know, be more mindful about the fact that you are doing it and have more confidence about it, because then you can say, well, what did I actually do? And how can I like just nudge that? There's a really great composition here. Like, you know, I think you kind of suggested the values quite nicely of like, you know, there could be some grouping here and it can get dark behind here. So you have this kind of like, you're suggesting light on dark and then dark on light. And it's like, oh, that's so composition. You can stack these things, all these things that we just talked about. It's like it's like multiple instruments playing at once, adding up to a song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the thing is that like it's not like oh, I'm not good enough to do this yet or whatever. Like you are already composing in other aspects of your life. Like if you have ever cooked anything, if you ever combined ingredients to create a certain meal, if you ever written anything, then you already know how to take these elements and like arrange them in such a way that they produce like a certain experience for the person consuming whatever you're making. This just happens to be with like slightly different tools, but the mental process of doing this is not something that is unique to drawing or painting. It's a thing that you've been doing already. You just, you know, the name composition is like scary sometimes or whatever.
Yeah, it's just intimidating, but once you kind of start practicing the intuitive sense of it, it's like a leap of faith, really, because it's scary to start, because it can be kind of vulnerable, being like, okay, like this is kind of the emotional, touchy-feely side of art. But once you start doing it, it's like, again, you realize that it's everything. And here, again, I'm just being like, what do I think looks cool for this composition? I'm trying to limit the variables I have. So, you know, 3 or 4 values, and how do I arrange them on top of each other? Like, you know, to have that feeling that I want.
You know, when I teach like my portrait drawing class, like the first thing I do with my drawing beginners is like have them recognize they're drawing on a sheet of paper, and that sheet of paper has 4 walls, and if they cram their portrait in the top left half of it, it looks bad, or it starts to drift off the side of the page. So they need to compose the portrait, even if it's just a sketch. You still compose it well, you know, center it in the page, you know, have your space, you know, sorted out.
That's another like big mental thing, I think, is like realizing that you are in charge and responsible for your decisions, but more that you're in charge, and like, you know, the paint and the canvas is not in charge of you. Like, you're making decisions here. You kind of have to like assert yourself and be like, no, these are just marks on a page. And then, you know, a squiggly line communicates a different feeling than like a very straight line or a very jagged line. And then when you're like aware of the power of the abstraction, you can start playing with it, and it becomes really fun. And I think, like, again, it becomes less intimidating to just explore.
Someone in chat said, it's traumatizing after getting roasted by your teacher telling you it looks like a kindergarten drawing. Your teacher probably sucks. Like, any person that, you know, is like a little further ahead of you in a certain path and uses whatever knowledge they have to like put you down is not someone who has a lot to offer most of the time, honestly. Like, people don't learn better by being put down. Like, none of my teachers were ever like mean to me, and I learned just fine. I think that's true with you too, right, Jake? And like, what about you, Devin? Like,
I was very mean to Jake.
Yeah, Devin bullied me. Devin bullied me. Yeah. I was too scared to show my face back then because of what he did.
Hey, it worked.
It worked. Yeah, here I am now.
Justified the meaning.
Yeah, and in terms of like again, like whether you're ready to compose or not, it's like, do you know how to make choices? Yeah, clearly. Like you wouldn't be alive if you didn't. So
Yeah, and like again, acknowledging that making choices is sometimes scary and
Mhm.
uncomfortable and difficult. And that's the only reason why composition is hard, because
Yeah.
composition is making choices.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot. I want to kind of step back here for a second and talk about like I want to read this quote that I have in the thread here from Corollas Duran. This is a quote that Ramon first introduced me to. And I think like if we want to step back to like what is the most important thing when it comes to composition, it's thinking about like your idea. So like Devin says that composition is about like the abstraction, thinking about everything as like a piece of modern art, but also like how do you think about the idea? Like is it just like literally illustrating a singular scene, or is it actually trying to find the abstraction of the story? Like what is the essence of the story? So this quote's from Corollas Duran, the teacher of Sargent, and it's really beautiful. He puts this way better than I ever could. So it's what is Romeo? What is Juliet? It is not by reproducing this or that scene of Shakespeare's drama that you can paint these creations of his genius. It's in presenting them in their most striking aspect that you best convey the idea you have formed of them. If you represent only the griefs, the tears, the death of Juliet and her lover, you give not but one phase of their existence. You have not expressed them. Before all, and above all, they have the expression of love. Love with all its youth, all its ardor, its heedlessness, its apprehensions, and its delirium. So, I kind of, like, how do you guys, like, think about the idea and come up with a composition after reading, any topic? Romeo and Juliet is completely arbitrary here.
I think it has to do with like, it's personal in the sense that like, what is it that appeals to you about that? Like, any story, like Romeo and Juliet, there's a number of stories from that time period that are very similar. There's one called The Lovers of Teruel, which is from Spain, and it's like basically the same story. And effectively, like the specifics of the characters are just a vehicle for transmitting this story about love, which is a thing that, a lot of people have experienced. And like, it's not so much about them as much as it is about this like universal experience, right? That's one, way to take one take on that. What Corrales is saying is that like, if, you want, like, let's say he was an easel painter, right? So like you get, one shot, like one frame, right? You're not really making like a comic or like a sequential thing. So if you have just one image to like encapsulate all of like shit, Romeo and Juliet. I mean, if you read, the play, like you could pick any one scene. You can pick a scene where they're just walking down the street, but that's not the thing that's special about them, right? So you have to choose a scene for like, what is the purpose of this? Like, what's the gist of this? What's the most significant part of them? Like, there's plenty of moments where they were like just, I don't know, sleeping, looking at a bird or something, walking. You probably wouldn't pick any of those moments because that's not the part about them that's like significant, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they like died for love, most people don't do that. So
Yeah,
that's probably the thing that's like, it's like
usually
being a news reporter.
like when you read something, if you like it, there's usually a moment that like puts a picture in your head. And the reason why it does is because you feel something. And like feeling something is a really important prerequisite to art, because then it gives you your compass to follow. And you can say like, are the lines that I'm making on the page or the shapes or the areas of, value, like, do they point me emotionally closer towards that feeling or not? And it's really nice, like doing composition for yourself, like not doing freelance, because you could say like, like nobody's can tell you no. And that's a really like liberating part of doing art. For me, it's why I wanted to do art in the first place, is because, sitting in school, like in math class, like, no, I'd rather be drawing. And Evie said in the chat that I'm not a traditional artist and I don't draw like the academic stuff at all, so I'm stuck. Like I think there can be, especially in a group, like an influence, or like it can feel like you have to do what everybody else is doing. But once you let go of that, and again, it just becomes this personal thing. Again, like, it's 3 a.m. sitting at the piano, composing something. You're not thinking about anybody else. You get something really unique. So I think like you don't have to make stuff that looks like the 19th century. You don't have to make stuff that looks like the Renaissance. Like if it doesn't do anything for you, it's possible that like once you do enough of your own thing, you can look back and say like, oh, actually, I see these principles that I can apply now that have nothing to do with style. But sometimes that can take time, and like again, it doesn't even have to happen if if you don't want it to.
And you have to really want something, right? Like if you're just studying academic drawing for the sake of studying academic drawing, it's not going to be quite as like compelling. It's like, yeah, it's like studying math in math class, but like with no practical application. But when it's your money and you're like, wait, shit, how do I need to make more to pay for my bills because, whatever, right? Then you have like a compelling, more important reason to get better at that. So like,
yeah,
and Bugaro there's a Bugaro quote about that, about like how the awful feeling of like having something inside you, having this idea that you want to communicate to other people that's important to you, and not having the tools to express it, like not being able to get it out and to communicate it. It's like if someone took your voice away or something.
Also, in the chat, someone says, how can we get the inspiration, motivation, sad face, implying that there is none of the motivation? Well, it's probably there. Like you're probably doing art because you have some kind of inspiration or motivation. But just like in life, it can be hard to decide what to do because you have all these voices of like other people saying, no, I think you should do this. Like, art's not a good path, or like, it's the same when you just sit down to draw. So I think like if you don't know what you're inspired by, it's more about finding it. And I think like giving yourself the space to like wake up in the morning and say like, okay, today I'm just going to kind of wait until I notice a feeling of inspiration. Because if you don't know what you're motivated by when you do have inspiration, you're not even going to notice it. So this is like just practicing being aware of what you find interesting. And again, just like maybe a little spark of like, oh, that's cool. And it could be anything. Like you take a walk and it's like, oh, that color looks cool, or that light looks cool, or you read something, or you watch something on TV. So it's just like waiting for that. So I would give yourself just like a week of practicing noticing when you find yourself excited by something. And then it should get a lot easier from there.
Yeah, like write stuff down. Like make a little mood board of like things that are like personally moving to you. Like lean into like whatever weird shit you're into, because you are. So it's like, just unabashedly like indulge in that. Yeah, exactly. And like no one's forcing you to do art. So like there's something there, right? I think it's exactly what Devin said. It's like it gets watered down in like to be a good artist, I should do this thing and I should do this other thing and like whatever. No, just do whatever. Like,
honestly, there's so much bullshit in art education. Like I'm like honestly, 99% of the stuff that you see about art like is usually bullshit. So, like taking things with a grain of salt and like being like, okay, I'm just gonna do things the way I want to do it, and then over time you can have more of like an opinion about was this thing correct, like what do I like, how would I critique something. It's also very useful looking at other people's work and like trying to articulate the things that are working, because just like we were looking at this composition, like everything is saying something, and one of the best ways to practice composition is looking at it and asking yourself, what is this thing saying? And it's harder than it sounds because we're not used to doing it, but then you also realize that like everything is communicating something. And when you're aware of that, you can be way more present when you're making work, and like that's how you can actually develop a style.
Yeah. Watch Chopped, like the cooking reality TV show.
We need to
where they just like give them a basket of like no, I learned so much from that actually, like just about like design in general, because like they give them a basket of just like just ingredients that don't necessarily go together. But like, listen to the critiques that the chefs give them at the end, where they're like, the ingredients don't integrate. Like they feel very separate. Like you have like a sauce that like, takes like this rice and this chicken and this like whatever other thing. The sauce is the element in common that ties it together. That's why we have sauces for food.
So
right?
Ramon and I are doing a fundamentals class right now. And like most of the class is about food. And like one of the core themes that we keep going over is that everything is the same. So the idea that like, no, the ingredients are kind of separate, they're not gelling together into one experience.
Yeah.
It would be the same critique for a painting. It would be the same critique for like, if you were in music, any kind of art, it all is based on the same principles of contrast. It all comes down to contrast. Like the saltiness is too much compared. It's the wrong ratio. So like really what you're doing in composition, when you're drawing, when you're making a painting, you're making a soup, and an important part of composition is tasting the soup. And you know, chefs probably, I think they do say this all the time, like you got to taste your food while you're making it. And it's really the same exact thing. It's like, and it's tiny, tiny increments that make huge differences, and really dialing in that like sweet spot. That's composition. And it's hopefully it doesn't sound too intimidating that way, because everybody knows how to like add salt to their food.
Yeah, like do you eat? Like
we gotta do an art chopped where we have random topics that you draw out of a hat, and you got a certain amount of time to make a painting. That sounds like fun.
That sounds like the Prix de Rome, yeah, but for
pretty much
for food. Should we hop to the next one?
Yeah. Let's hop to the next one. Ramon, do you want to choose one? Have you been eyeing any particular ones? So let's keep this round like super fundamental. Like how do we come up with sketches? How do we approach kind of this basic stuff? And then the next one we'll choose something that's like a little bit, a little bit more.
Sounds good. A little spicier. Yeah. Let me go ahead and share the screen.
With the
yeah. Exactly. Do I have to share the screen over here, or do you do it?
Yeah, just share in Zoom, and I can put you on.
Okay, perfect.
Sweet.
All right. So I like this one. I was lurking a little bit in like the last couple of days. This one is by Delirium 2000. And you know what I really like about this, just in general, is like it actually has some of like the it feels like it's from the time period too. Like it feels a little bit like paintings from like the Renaissance, where it's like there's this aspect of almost like emotional perspective, where it's not necessarily that like the buildings would look like this in real life, but like stuff gets bigger because it's important. And I don't know, there's just like there's something about like just the like them on the separate balconies, like, and this like coming downwards, that like it feels like there's like a chasm between them, and like all the fighting in between. This is literally like a visual metaphor for like everything that's standing in their way of like being together, which is really effective. Like a lot of the times, it's like the same stuff that people have to come up with like for their like essays in high school. You know what I mean? Like most of what you're doing when you're composing is like, the most fundamental thing is thinking about stories, which you already do. Everybody like as existing as a human like has to think about that. And so like, how would you show that two people are like distant emotionally? Well, it's like the most obvious way is to literally pull them apart, right? How do you show that there's like, their like family conflicts are getting in the way of them? Well, how about you literally put the family conflict in between them, which I think our friend Delirium 2000 here is doing really effectively. And who knows, maybe they've had some composition training, maybe not, right? But just as a person living in the world, it's like, I think that, these are things where like you have to follow like what your instincts are for this, because they're probably pretty good. The composition stuff is just to like avoid things that are distracting and to maybe like make your message more effective and all that, right? But just this idea of having like, okay, let's say you have a frame, right? Whatever that frame is. Here the frame is really square. Usually people avoid that because it doesn't give any like direction to the composition. It makes it feel like kind of like static. In the sense that like, a vertical frame like this implies like motion up and down. A frame that's aggressively horizontal implies movement, going in one of these two directions. But I think because they're kind of at a standstill here, right? Like that actually works pretty well, I think. So, sort of in keeping with what Devin was talking about, it's like you have, them as like these important centers, right? There's like, there's Romeo, there's Juliet, like they're sort of like these like almost like two magnets, right? But they don't get to be together. Again, this dips down, right? So there's, this movement down here, and then you get, just the chaos happening in the middle. The fact that all of this stuff over here, is fairly orderly, like the buildings, it's like relatively like it's like pretty geometric. It's all like man-made. It's all just sort of like, straight lines and all that. I think that's actually like pretty effective. Like, let's say that with what you have here, right? You can play off of these like two ideas. So what you can have is you can have elements that are static, and the frame can be one of them, right? So you have things that are like unmoving, unchanging, like maybe, right? Like the social norms in Italy during the time of this, like, or social norms in general, right? That they're like sort of hard to change, and like people are, like too invested in them. And then you can have, the sort of like, and even that order can even imply that like this is kind of like predestined for them, right? Like it's just the kind of like universal order. And then you have, the sort of like chaos, right? So you have something that's like orderly, predetermined, like again, maybe like straight lines, maybe things like more evenly spaced, etc. And then you just have like a bonanza down here, right? Like all these people just going nuts and like all of their petty squabbles. Also, the fact that like Romeo and Juliet are above this, right? They're the ones that are seeing beyond their petty family conflicts. Like this is really effectively done, right? Whatever like inspired you to make these decisions, these are good decisions. And by good, I mean like they serve a certain story. They tell a certain story very effectively. Now, exactly like Devin was saying, we can take what you already have and we can build on it, right? One of my teachers, Will Weston, used to call it like plussing, right? It's like you take what you have, and then let's say like you're tasting like your food that you're making, and you're like, oh shit, like this little bit of spice, like this is pretty good. What if I add more to it, right? And then that's sort of the same thing here. It's like, and you might even like try to add like a bit more, until you're like close to overdoing it. So for example, let's say here, okay, what I would do is all these people here, if there's people fighting, have a bunch of them fighting. Don't just have like 3 or 4 or whatever. If you only make a few people fighting here, they're going to be more like individuals. And so your attention is going to go to like, specific people like this person here. Make them more anonymous. Make them like just kind of like mindless, mindless people like kind of fighting. And here, what you can do to actually, for the process of composing, think of everybody as wearing like a really crappy ghost costume from like Spirit Halloween or something, right? So like imagine that everybody is wearing like a spooky ghost costume like this. These are what we call like noodle people, right? So imagine that this is 3D, this is like a sheet over each person, and focus on what they're doing like as groups and like they're acting, right? Is this a noodle that's like standing up straight? Is this a noodle that's like, sneaking like around a corner? Is this a noodle that's like scared and falling back, right?
This made me so much better at composition.
Oh yeah,
Instantly.
everybody does this. Everybody does this. Like, Dev and I are planning like the next lecture that we're doing for class tomorrow, and it's like literally just like, okay, think of everything as like noodles, piles of noodles. But here, I'm not gonna get too far into this, but like, let me just show you just real quick. One of the examples that we use a lot is Lord Leighton. So like, here's this finished painting of Perseus and Andromeda, right? And it's like, it's a stunning painting. Like, here's Perseus, he's like winding up, or pulling back like the bow to, release this arrow, or I guess he just shot an arrow at this dragon that has imprisoned Andromeda, right? And again, it's very impressive overall. You look at it and it's like hard to know where to start, but we can actually show you where it started. It started here. It started from this. He had like this little idea of like, what if there's Andromeda and she's kind of like a little noodle person and she's like trapped, right? You can see that like her arms are bound in this, right? And like, what if something's encircling her? Like, oh, the dragon. He could have kept it there. Like you can see the dragon wrapping around her here. He could have just had her and the dragon where there's like no hope. Or, he could have been like, well, what if I make this longer and I add Perseus coming to save her? Again, that would have different feelings. If you make this canvas more static, more square, it can feel like she's stuck, right? Like there's no saving her. If you expand the canvas and now you have Perseus in it, then it feels like, oh, she was trapped, but she's about to get rescued. And so you just take this idea, you build on it. He actually made like little clay models, of Andromeda, of the dragon, of Andromeda and the dragon, of Perseus. He got some live models to like elaborate the idea more, and he probably had a mannequin and did this little drapery study. He put it all together, and then he made his final painting. And there's probably even more studies than this, but it all starts from this. This is what you have to do. You cannot cook with too many ingredients all at once. You got to start from like just like a few manageable things.
I saw somebody in chat, or I just saw people in chat talking about, like figure drawing and like the fundamentals and stuff like that, and like where people learn these things. But, I think the thing about composition is like, you should start it right from the beginning, and you don't have to know how to draw in order to practice composition. Yeah. And like, that's probably the biggest mistake I think that all education makes, nowadays, is starting like, putting the cart before the horse.
Oh, 100%. Like, people get too stuck just like thinking that drawing a knee is like the most important thing. But look, even Bouguereau, in making this crazy painting, right? He started like this. This is the first sketch for that, or one of the first sketches for that painting. It's literally just little noodle people, right? And this is a glorified stick figure, right? It's like what I've been calling in class a thick figure. It's a stick figure with thickness. That's it, right? And like, anybody can draw that, And again, like, you can look at all these scenes, all these complex scenes, and like the drawings that start them are like, you could do that. Like anybody could do that. You, person who has just started drawing like in the last like 10 minutes, it will not take you that long to be able to draw whatever this is, And so it's not like a prerequisite where you have to like know everything. Like, like look at these dogs, when Jerome first drew them. Like, he's drawing those emotional noodles, right? Like this noodle's lying down, this noodle's attentive, it's paying attention. This noodle's very demure, whatever, right? And then eventually, once he has something that feels right, like Devin was saying, like the abstraction, just those little forms, like just the simple elements have to feel a certain way. When you're okay with how they feel, then you can like turn them into dogs or turn them into Diogenes or, whoever or whatever else. But all of this stuff starts out from things like this. These are Bouguereau sketches, right? So like anybody that tells you that figure drawing is just like knowing all the anatomy or making everything perfect or like rendered all the time, they don't have a complete view of what figure drawing is and what it's for, right? Because it is for the expression of ideas regardless of what those ideas are. Anyway, going back to this, like it can become more fun and like manageable. Like, let's say that we add another layer here, and we just, again, you want to make this chaotic? Okay, fine. Let's make it even more chaotic. Like, let's go nuts, right? Let's say like, okay, if this guy's thrusting a spear into this person, like, they're probably not standing up straight to do that, right? So it's like, they're leaning over the person, and they're like, all right, it's spear time. And like, the other person's like, oh no, I would rather not get speared. And say, okay, like we get like a little bit of that, but like, I imagine in this kind of like combat, like, it's probably chaotic. There's probably like more people over here. You don't even have to make all of these people recognizable, right? And there's no such thing as like fair combat in this, right? Like these two people are fighting, but maybe like someone else's friend comes and just like stabs this other person, or whatever else, right? I'm not an expert in, medieval combat.
Just think Game of Thrones. It's a documentary.
Yeah, exactly. This is where's David Attenborough when you need him? Like, and like this person's running, like make him really run. You think like that's how you would run for your life? No, like just try to like think that you're the character and be like, oh, I'm out. Like I am gone, right? And think of it this way, like you already know what levers to pull, because like how do you make it look like the person's running more? Lean them more. Right? Like this is, like, look at this. Like this is, I am not in danger. This is, oh shit, I should get going. I'm kind of in danger. This is, oh my God, I'm going to die. And this is like, I am gone, So like just in how you move that around, and like, and if they're running, who are they running from? What are they running from? Right? As far as perspective goes for this, like that can be another intimidating factor. You don't have to think about it yet. In terms of like, not in a really complete way. Like, think of perspective as just like, things get smaller as they're further away. How much smaller? We don't care yet. We'll figure that out later. But they do get smaller. Like, that's all you need to know about perspective at this point, at this juncture. So anyway, if you put this guy like right in the center, and again, he's really recognizable, you make it about him. which is probably, you could do that, but that's probably not what you want, right? Also, if all these people are dropping like flies, there's going to be people on the ground. So add some people on the ground, right? Now, if you have all these like little, you could have composed this with a bunch of bananas if you wanted to, you know, or like little like sea anemones or, you know, something like that, right? Imagine like, make it a real, you know, a real battle. Make this like, make the stakes be high. Make this like, if it's just like 3 or 4 people fighting, how is that going to get in the way of their romance, you know? Make it like a real obstacle. Think of it as like, you're not an observer, you know, looking from the outside. You are like living this story, right? What I would say here is like, for the building, just take this and straighten it out. Make sure, you know, I think because the buildings here are the thing that's like, you know, orderly compared to like the chaos of what all these morons are doing down here, then make this like as straight as you can make it for it to be different from all this, right? For it to like stand out. Just like Devin said, it's about contrast, right? And I actually like having like, you know, you have this tower here and it's like almost in the center, but not quite. It's like a little off to the side. I think that's great because again, it makes it not entirely about this. But then, you know, eventually we would need to find a way to, you know, make it a little bit more about Romeo and Juliet. Like, you know, if they really want to be with each other, and again, there's this big barrier in between them, right? Well, a couple of things. Let's emphasize the barrier. Let's emphasize how hard it is for them to be together. And one thing you can do is like, you can add a little bit of tone almost to color code your work, like almost to make it so that like it keeps this organized. Because notice at first, it's hard to separate like this stuff from this stuff, right? It's hard to keep track of it. So if you come and add a tone here, just something that makes it different, you know, it makes it easier to keep track of, and it emphasizes this downward movement. And you can, you know, you can figure out something so that the tower's maybe not as dark, so it doesn't interfere with this like, you know, dark, you know, this like boom, boom, like movement going down. Or you can move the tower over a little bit so it lines up with like this sort of downward triangle a little bit more. But how about this? Romeo and Juliet, because they're trying to be together, even though there is this like physical and like, you know, just, you know, distance cause also like, you know, like political, like familial and all that, make them actually try to be together, right? So like Romeo, I like that you have him with his outstretched like arm, but like make him lean over the balcony, make him really try to be as close to her as possible, right? And the same with her, you know, make them really try to like, you know, be with each other, right? And maybe like, you can kind of decide like which one of them you kind of want more of the focus on, right? I think here you have a good opportunity because the building ends here and then there's like this, you can silhouette Juliet against the sky. You know, you have a good chance of just like making it about her, you know? So those are things that, and when you add the clouds, if you want to add clouds, maybe make the clouds like swirl around them, right? Make the clouds support what's happening here. Like make the clouds like, it's like the entire universe, the entire world is like revolving around them, right? But that's what I would try to focus on, you know, and again, Delirium 2000, I think you're doing a really great job with this. Like it's a great idea starting out. These are just like a couple little things we can do to make the idea, you know, read even more strongly, right? And to just like build on what you have. Okay.
Yeah. Or you know, like one idea I had, like, you know, what if one of them even had like a leg going over the balcony too? Because they are, you know, suicidal. They'll kill themselves to be together. So like, what if they're trying to get to each other so hard? You know, like if you think about the story too, like, you know, what happens or what's gonna happen in the story, like that type of stuff, it makes a huge difference. Yeah,
that's really great, actually. Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, like imagine like having Romeo, because he's the more like reckless one, I would argue. Like, yeah, what if he is trying to like do that and he's the one that dies first, right? So like, let's say, yeah, you have that, and it's like already the viewer would get the sense of dread looking at this, like, oh no, he's gonna fall. Like, you know, it's, you can even make the composition, maybe you could make it a little taller so that he has like a longer distance to fall, so the stakes are higher. And yeah, like anything like that, like you don't have to have specialized art knowledge to do that. You just have to draw on your experiences, like as a person. Like what would be more dangerous? Like,
yeah, you can always get reference. You know, you don't have to really know how to draw. You can you can cheat really hard, but you can't cheat a good idea. Probably, I don't think so.
Yeah, you can. Again, you can noodle this as much as you want. Like this is a crowd of people, right? And this is like you'll figure it out later. That's fine, right? It's like you. One thing that Will Weston, one of my teachers, always told me was like, go with what you know. There's going to be some part of this that you're like more locked in on, that you're like, okay, this is like the thing that I'm pretty sure about. And there's stuff that you're like, I don't know, maybe I'll add a tree, I guess. I don't know, right? And so deal with the stuff that the things that you already know, and then you can, you know, sort of mess around with the stuff that is kind of more up in the air.
Great. Yeah. So here, let's keep them going, so that we can get to as many as possible. I don't know, we're all kind of yappers here, so this has the potential to go like 20 hours. So just let me know how you guys are feeling, and we'll keep it moving along.
I was noodling on one while Ramon was talking. I can show what it came up. Yeah, maybe to save time, Ramon, you can like look at one while I'm talking too, or something.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, let me share my screen.
One second while we wait for Devin to pull that up. Check out. What do you guys want to plug? Devin, you're Underpaint Academy.
Yeah, so I run Underpaint Academy. I'm fortunate to know a lot of really good artists, and I'm fortunate enough to have been able to convince them to do classes. And I think it's really great information. I basically only have teachers where I think that it's stuff that's going to help you in your art journey. It's very like it's not, there is an industry focus in terms of like, getting a job or something, but it's more about like the fulfillment of doing art, how to become yourself in painting. So Ramon and I are doing a class right now on complete fundamentals. I think it's like how to avoid all of the easy pitfalls. Basically, like it's what I wish I had when I started. I think it would have saved me like 5 years of fumbling around trying to find the right information. So yeah, you could check out our class. Our last week is actually tomorrow, but any of the classes you can pick up recordings and you keep them forever. Yeah, check out any of the classes on Underpaint.
Lots of cooking analogies.
Yeah. Ramon, do you want to plug anything?
Yeah, so I have, obviously the course with Devin. There's also, I have like courses on like anatomy, on perspective, and also I have a class that is the making of this like big painting behind me. So it's everything from like the first sketches all the way to like the final painting. It's like all like, recordings and like in class. The class mostly already happened. There's going to be one bonus session coming up pretty soon, but you can pick up the recordings if you're interested, if you want to see like everything that goes into making like a final, big painting. Also how to make a mannequin and a mummy. That's also part of it.
Sweet. Yeah, that class, taught me everything I know about composition, so I definitely recommend it. And one final thing, if you guys want more streams, you can become a channel member by clicking the join button right next to the subscribe button. And you get cool stuff like this. Everybody wins. All right, let me pull over to Devin. Devin, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I want to talk about value a little bit after this too. Yeah, I also have a class at the school entirely on value, and do private teaching as well. Kind of finalize the plug. Let me go through my thoughts on this. So we talked about like even arrangement of things in my last critique, and it's the same thing here. So like, what is our canvas? Well, it's a nice ratio. Like it's the first thing to think about. But where is it split? Like almost right in the center. See how like all the weight is saying like, oh, it's divided right here. So we have half and we have half. Now this particular scene of Romeo coming up the balcony, like he's climbing up the balcony. It's very dramatic. Like, so I think like, a composition cut in half like this would maybe be better for like, somebody meditating like under a waterfall or something, like something very static and peaceful. Like that's something that would kind of be in sympathy with that idea, with that feeling. So my immediate instinct is like, we just got to make this less symmetrical, like less even. And for some reason, just the instinct as humans is to like make things even. Like when you're drawing, like if you want to draw a forest or something, it's always like, I'm going to make every tree like right in a row. And it takes a lot of practice to be like, well, maybe I'll group this one here, maybe have like, you know, a little straggler off to the side or something. It's like, now all of a sudden it's like, it feels more natural. Oh, here's a group of trees, maybe some stragglers. That's what I want to do with this composition. So my thought was just bring everything up. Now the weight on everything. Now it's not just this line, because remember, it's not literal. Like we have this line, but it's gravity. Her face is pulling up. So it's like, it's not here and it's not here. Well, somewhere in between. So now we have a division more like this. And that, again, is like, oh, we got like a big forest here and some stragglers over here, and it keeps your eye moving and it feels more natural. Yeah, and really the big thing is that I wanted to give, like you're suggesting it here, this like sense of upward motion. It has this feeling. Like, I don't know, you can't argue against that. Like that's what you're going for, and you can communicate that to somebody. This is like a way of communicating through visual imagery. It is a language, and this is saying like up. So I want to make that stronger. Right now it's just whispering, like, you know, it's not very confident about it. I think the way to make it more confident is have more of this space, like more room to move up, a place to arrive at, basically. Like, you know, we started here and we're going to end here. When it's halfway, it's like it doesn't make that journey feel as significant. So I think that was the main thing. Otherwise, I think this is a really cool composition. I just think it needed that like little push. In addition, I think it's worth talking about, like, because lines can be very intimidating, especially getting rid of lines. And you have a really cool value structure that's like suggested here. So how can we push the values further? Well, the other thing I thought was like, well, if we have this upwards push, you had this bird up on the top. Maybe we can like bring him back. But I want to like have something counter to this. So that's why, you know, I added more of these. Eventually it could be feathers. I think that's what you were going for here. Like you have the feathers framing this, but like, let's make that more intentional. So again, it's like, what is the image doing? Well, it's doing this and it's doing this. And it works, but I just like so want to push that weight up here so it's not splitting this in half and like working against that pull. Okay, so yeah, up here. And I'm basically just painting over the lines. Like one of the counterintuitive things about values is like you want to lose things into other things. You'll see, especially I do that in the hair. Let me bring it up a little bit more recent and kind of just see what I was doing. Okay, so yeah,
the layer
like
situation is insane, here. Devin.
What's that?
There's so many layers on every single one of your drawings. I'm sorry. You have new layer bound to left click?
What do I Control N? Well, I wanted to specifically have layers like just so it wasn't like, oh, I show up with a paint over it. You can like look through what I was doing. But yeah, I use layers as basically like just a history, so I can just scroll back through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been kind of a habit to keep a long history. So having values, like, okay, this is hair. I know that there's like a boundary here, like, you know, you draw it here, but the value, maybe this dark part of the hair and the background is the same thing. And when you start losing things into other things, that's when things start to feel like they're in space, like they're real, like they're in atmosphere. And it's really hard to do at first, and it's still hard to do. It's like one of the most counterintuitive things. But yeah, that's what I was trying to do. Like, let's see, like there's a little part of his leg getting hit by light. Maybe that can merge a little bit into that wall and it can kind of seat him inside of this atmosphere. Yeah, if the coat, you could see like the coat inside the sleeve was really dark. That's thinking like, okay, it's shadow and make it very dark, but how much darker would it be relative to everything else? Well, it might get dark enough to kind of wind up at something similar to the wall, and you might get a little bit of like a lost edge with those values also. Let's see what else. Okay, maybe it's good to talk about the zigzag. Also, like I lost the pillar on the right side again because it's very symmetrical. So it's like, okay, maybe I'll add like a little bit of interest with some pillar detail like going on over here, like some kind of intricate column that she's got. But then I don't want to have nothing on the other side because then it just feels like it's off balance. Well, I'll just put a feather. Like that's the thinking. It's like it needs something, but I don't want to repeat myself. I will use a different thing, and it could be a different value. It could be a different color. It could be, faces have a lot of impact. It's like you can kind of just pull these things out of your toolbox to say, well, I need something there. What's something interesting that I didn't use before that I could use to draw the eye? Okay, so
Chat wants to know
just like,
can you give Romeo like a BBL? Would that improve this composition? Like picked him up a little bit.
What is it? What is a BBL?
Oh no!
Yeah, explain, Jake, in great detail.
That would be a Brazilian butt lift. A little bit of plastic surgery.
Oh, okay.
This
But
is
that's all
Italy,
right.
though.
We can. That'll be. Yeah, there we go. We can pass on that. It's fine.
Yeah, a little bit of a lift, minor plastic surgery.
Yeah, we don't want to
give him those wheels of cheese, Devin.
Okay, I just want to talk a little bit about the zigzag because that's something that really helps with values working from imagination. Now, the number one thing is working from life, and taking the values that you see and trying to fit them inside of this budget. And what I mean by the budget is we have a maximum and a minimum. We have 0 and 100. If you have oil paint, you got your lightest paint, and you have your darkest paint. So everything you do is within a budget. And how do we take that and fit that within, while still having identifiably different groups? This is like what Ramon was saying with Chopped. Like, you don't want to have your ingredients like, oh, that really is like calling too much attention to itself. It's not like merging in with the greater whole. So I want to have things that look like, oh, like her dress would be white and his outfit would be black, and like have different materials, like maybe this is shiny or something. So how do we do all of that inside the budget without it just turning into like mud? So something that I've developed to help me not have to make a million calculations in my head is think about reusing values. It's important to be like pretty stingy with the decisions that you make. So anytime you make a value change, like you really want to have a good reason to do that. I was looking back at the beginning and like all the value changes back here, like you're using all your budget up. Like you're going all the way, like this range in here, like, that's money that you could spend elsewhere. That's why I made it like, bring back all these layers, even the Brazilian butt lift. Yeah, that's why I made the background here like quite a bit flatter. Okay, so zigzag. It's a way of relating light and shadow, or anything really. Again, just reusing value. So for example, let's make a little thing off to the side. Well, we've got her lightest dress here. It's really my brightest value. Okay, so what is that in shadow? It goes to maybe this value, something like this. You can kind of see it here. Now, his little doublet thing, I don't really know how to refer to Renaissance clothing. This part, like I'm thinking of this as a cylinder, and maybe only this part of the cylinder is getting hit by light. So this part of the cylinder of his arm and that material in light is this. You see that's the same. So her really light dress in shadow is the same as his slightly darker shirt in the light. Now, as that gets darker, this is that in shadow. So first thing, I just want to make a note for myself. These two are the same. Now, what about his pants? Now, his pants here are mostly in shadow. You can see, he's got a big butt because of the BBL. So it's mostly here. These down planes, it's in shadow. So maybe there's like a little bit of his calf or like something up here. It's getting a little bit lighter. That's another thing. Like I want this value to be light because I don't want to just have like legs. It's like very clunky. So I'll figure out like I would figure out the pose of his legs more later, but you can see here like maybe he's lifting his calf up a little bit and it's starting to hit in the light. So his pants in the light are now this value, which would go to, or actually no, this is the same. It's the same as his pants. We don't have an example of this. So let's say his sleeve here, I'll just make his sleeve here a different color or value. Now this in the light has to go darker in the shadow. So we could put that here. And now we have another zigzag for a completely different material. And now we're out of budget. You know, we have our lightest and our darkest. Now, what if we wanted to have a different material, say something really shiny? Well, for example, her hair, we could start throwing multiple values in all at once. So, you know, we've got dark value, and then we got middle value, and we got our lightest value. And if you want to make this really shiny, they can all hang out together. Or maybe there could be like, you know, highlights on, this could be like a leather doublet or something. If we start having all these values interact with each other, hanging out all at the same party instead of like just light and shadow. So this thing is like the most important. You could have areas of light kind of bleed into other areas of shadow. And, you know, these are things you can come up with for yourself. And it makes working from imagination way easier when you have these like, you know, tools that you can use. So composition at its core is that kind of like, what am I saying? What do my decisions mean? What is it communicating? But then there's a whole ton of tools you can get better at to like make that more powerful, like anatomy or perspective. So it's like, you don't have to know any of that to practice like communication. Then over time you can refine how you say things. It's like if you like really needed to go to the bathroom and you were in a foreign country, like you're gonna like, you know, do the I have to go to the bathroom dance, the universal language. It's not a very like elegant way to communicate, but people are gonna get what you mean. Then like when you get back home, it's like, oh, if I'm ever back in that situation again, I should probably study up on this. Like then you could go learn your perspective, then you could learn your anatomy. It works the same way. So that is that's the end of my speech.
Sweet. That's a great one. Want to just run it right back to Ramon? Keep knocking him out?
Sure.
All right, let's do it. Here, I'll go ahead and share. So I was looking at these two, and I think there's like some related things here, like just like acting wise. So I think that'll also kind of help to move things along for us. So the first one is, who is that by? The first one is by Slappy Kazoo Llama.
You don't have to read Discord names. It might just be for the best.
Okay. Well, the other one is by Zork. It's a Z, 2 S's, and Orc. All right. So anyway, I like, these are kind of like, I like these as a pair because they're sort of, you know, contrast, right? This is like peak them like enjoying each other's company, like in love, like kind of like shutting out like everything else in the world. And this is like, you know, peak tragedy, like he sees her, like he's like, oh my God, we can't be together. And then there's like hope somewhat offered. I actually really like this take of like, I don't think this is canon, right? But like having Romeo like hallucinate Juliet like appearing to him and giving him the idea that the only way they can be together is if he takes the poison too, and they are both dead, right? So anyway, let's start over here. So one thing that was mentioned originally is I feel like it needs more, but nothing I try looks good. You know, I don't think it necessarily needs more. I think like, you know, I think this is like a really like iconic image, right? Like I think anyone who looks at this will sort of understand like, you know, that these two people are like in love, right? Like that there's like, again, sort of like the flying high feeling of like, you know, all the oxytocin and all that. And so I think that's like fairly easy to understand. I think adding a bunch more stuff like the well or like these trees and all that kind of takes away from this. I like having this. I'm not sure if these are like, like trees in the background, or if this is like, like one of the parties from like the families or whatever, like coming for them. But I think one thing that we can do here is we can actually make this like a vertical composition, right? Because like, what is this about? This is about them being in love, right? The kind of transcendent feeling of love, and how it sort of like raises you up, right? Like a lot of this stuff is almost like visual puns. Like, okay, so what can we do? Because this is not like, Jake here is like not dictating like it has to be a horizontal format or it has to be a square format or whatever. You have freedom over like the aspect ratio. So why don't we make this a vertical composition to emphasize, like just the kind of like how love is kind of like, raising them up and creating all of this like, sort of, what would you call it? Like these feelings of like, I don't know, elevation, being closer to heaven or something like that. I really like this. I think you did a really good job here, or a really good choice here of like having like a low horizon. I don't think the Roman armor is canon, but that's fine. Again, we could actually technically set the story in like any time frame. That doesn't really matter that much. But let's go ahead and crop this here, because I think part of it is like making it so that it's like them against the world, right? Like nothing else matters other than them. There's not a lot that we can add to the ground here that really would, be particularly important, right? And so, just kind of like up, up, up. I think that would be effective, right? Again, like think of it as like this is not some esoteric like art thing, like, oh, I need to have all these art skills to do this. Like, just how would you tell this story so that other people know what you mean, right? Like, how would you tell, like, if this happened to you, how would you tell your friends about it, right? So I think drawing on what we have here, we can try to push this, right? Like, how about he's raising her up like even higher, right? And okay, so let's go ahead and we'll take our feet and everything here and just move her up a little bit. And if he's like spinning her, let's say, then the dress would probably be like, flying up in the air a little bit more. Like it probably wouldn't even be coming down like this. Unless this is just like, he just like picked her up and like, just straightforward, like up motion. But, this is a painting. We get to do whatever we want. So like, what if we did do that, right? Like maybe here we'll make the arms like a little too long, you can do that for effect. And if it's like too much, then you can, kind of like, I don't know, bring it down a little bit later. But first, just kind of like get that feeling like of like, him like sort of like, reaching out, like even like with his head, like just everything reaching. Like the abstract feeling here in this composition is up, 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 right? That's the big thing, right? And so, okay, he has to have like, his feet grounded, just like, sort of like physically, that's important, right? Otherwise they're both gonna fall over. So, okay, we get to have a little bit more of the ground here, maybe. And, okay, so let's say here, again, the feet a little bit more planted. At first, like, you can even, because he has to be kind of, at least in this scenario, like sort of like, you don't want to draw attention to things that are not important, right? So, for instance, like, if you had his feet kind of floating, that would become distracting. Right? And so you have to make sure that his feet feel planted so that the action is physically viable enough that the viewer's not going to be like, that's not how you lift somebody, or whatever, right? And so, anyway, you don't have to really worry about like the details of the face or anything just yet. So, okay, this is like our little Jack-in-the-Box Romeo. If she's like, flying high, like make it, their love is so dramatic and so sort of in a way kind of like idealized, like because obviously stuff like this kind of happens, I guess, but like most normal people are not like dying for love, right? And so I think if their love is that over the top, maybe like we try to make this composition like a little over the top, right? Like if she's like arching her back and almost like fully horizontal, like she's actually flying, make her like really fly then, it's sort of like you'll get an idea, and often what'll happen is a lot of us will kind of get like self-conscious or like we'll underplay it, but like lean into it, see how like ridiculous it can get, right? And then if it gets too ridiculous, then you pull it back. But like think about like when you are joking around with your friends, right? And, someone says something funny, and then like, you keep like repeating it, and it builds and it builds and it builds until you're just like both like belly laughing, right? Like, I think that's sort of the same thing here, where it's like you can keep pushing this and be like, how can we make this like even more like, push this feeling even more? So like, if they're in like this sort of state of ecstasy, like maybe she's looking up toward the heaven, maybe she has her eyes closed, like maybe she's like, or she could be looking at him, depending on like what you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on their connection? Do you want to focus on like the transcendent feeling of love that she's feeling? You could even do that. You could make it, I mean, I guess this might be like a more cynical take, right? But it's like how sometimes people like the idea of love more than necessarily the person that they're with, right? Like that's something that if you have her looking toward the skies and focusing on like how she feels about this moment, rather than like the connection, you can make your picture feel more like that. Or, you can have this like tender moment where it's like, you can emphasize like the trust that she has in him or that they have in each other, right? And like the adoration. You can have her hair kind of echo, what the, this like flying drapery is doing. And maybe like, pull her arms out a little bit more out here, or again, depends, right? You can have this kind of like free feeling of like her arms, like, sort of, again, like she's not touching any of the ground. You can try some other stuff, like you can have them like link arms somehow. That would also not be a bad idea. Oh, sorry, 1 second, my tablet turned off. Come on. All right, I might have to plug it in. 1 second. But yeah, overall, like, again, the storytelling is something that all of us already, it's like community property. It's like you already basically know how to do it, but we can kind of push things more. Here we go. Were you gonna say something, Jake?
I was curious, like how do you approach, like you wouldn't want to do this type of stuff in a full scale image, right? Because you would draw it once and then it wouldn't look right, and then you draw it again, it would take forever, right? So you would probably do this in a thumbnailing stage. You want to tell people like what thumbnailing is and like how that works?
Yeah. So usually, we're all human, right? And so part of the issue is that sometimes like you want to just jump into the final painting, and ideally you should have, as few steps as you can get away with in between, like, when you have an idea and when you express that idea. But if it's something that means something to you and it's like a big enough task, then you have to break it up into steps. And, everybody says like, oh, focus on the big idea, focus on like the big feeling, like do that first and don't worry about details. Well, that's hard to do because the temptation is always there to like, yeah, but like, what if I like, worry a little bit more about like this well or the grass or like whatever, right? And so I think one of the reason why this evolved is like, to prevent that, to physically stop you from getting into details, people will do very small little drawings, right? And, they go by various names, but, sometimes people call them thumbnails. I mean, they're not literally necessarily they don't have to be the size of like the, your thumbnail, but those are usually like little things like, again, like what you see with like this, this little Jerome, like this was a full sheet of like other stuff that he was planning out. And then on the side, he was like, wouldn't it be sick if I just had Diogenes with his lamp looking for an honest man, and then there's just like dogs around him? Like, wouldn't that be awesome? And that little sketch, like this tiny little sketch where like even if he wanted to, he couldn't add detail to it because it's too physically small, that turned into this like whole painting, right? And to me, it's like one of my favorite, like most like emblematic Jerome paintings. And so you wouldn't jump into like doing this, right? Where you're like hiring models or like worrying about all these folds or whatever. No, you would start with stuff like this that like, it's kind of small, modest, like it takes the pressure off of you, makes it like not that big of a deal, doesn't take that long. Here's like other little ideas that, these are by Lord Leighton too. He's like just playing around with little noodles, seeing if anything comes of it. Some of them turn into something, some of them don't. These are by Bouguereau. Again, just like little screwing around, type of sketches. Maybe maybe this one was a cool idea and it gets like a little bigger and you get to flesh it out a little bit more. but it looks like this one evolved out of like these, you know? So anyway, yeah, so you develop these ideas usually pretty small, again, just so that you avoid distractions, right? And you sort of limit the number of things that you have to deal with. Here, again, I said I think it is a really good idea to have the point of view like really low like this. Maybe we emphasize this by even having like these hills be sort of like smaller rolling hills like this. Again, we keep the focus mostly on them. Here we could cap this like maybe here, because that space isn't doing that much for us. If we wanted to, we could add some clouds that are kind of like almost like revolving around them, right? So it's like it emphasizes that idea of their love being like this thing that's like divine or like whatever, right? And what that does is like you can swirl those clouds around them, right? Like just basically that kind of stuff is the sauce, right? Because let's say you have like you got him here, you got her here, and you got the ground, and you're like, okay. So that's like having like your rice and your vegetables and like your meat, like or protein or whatever over here. But that's not really a meal that anyone wants to eat. You know what I mean? You need to like get the sauce on here to tie it all together, right? Something that links these things together and creates a cohesive experience. And so, that's something that we can do over here too, right? We can, using like birds or trees or clouds or whatever.
I like that little cart in the background. That's from the original, right? You didn't sketch that in.
What, this right here?
Yeah, I like that little like procession or little cart.
Oh yeah, no, that's from the original. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, because it's like and I like the idea of that being like their families kind of rolling up on them, but they're still pretty far away, so they get to like enjoy this moment before like the shit hits the fan. But yeah, you can design these like little paths, like that sort of like lead into the parts that you want. So you could like have a cloud that like or an empty part of the sky or something that like happens to fall along this path, or like a tree or a rock or a well, and you already have like elements of that in here, right? And so you just take what you have and then you just like make it even like more strategic, like having just like little bits of these clouds here. Your eye will kind of jump from like bump bump bump, right? Because if you put like several things in a row like this, like your brain tries to fill in the gaps, your brain tries to like connect the dots through all this, right? And so it's you just take advantage of like the things that you already have, basically. So anyway, yeah, you don't need to know what these elements are at first. You can just be like, I want something that goes boom, 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 something that goes bop, 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 coming up this way, and then maybe something that goes up here, right? And again, maybe they're the focus. That's the important stuff. And then like in the back, you have like maybe lower hills, right? But you like, just so they don't draw too much attention. But yeah, you have like this kind of like foreboding kind of like, menace in the background. Right. But again, the idea I think is really good. You can just like, the more that you can do with it is just push it rather than necessarily adding more things. And with this one here, like I think this is also like a really cool, like emotional moment. I just really like the idea. I'm a sucker for that sort of thing. I would recommend that you look at Bastien Lepage. And look at his Joan of Arc. People criticized it because it had like the apparition that Joan of Arc saw, but I think it's really cool and like really weird. I like that sort of thing. I think this is the whole painting. So like here's Joan of Arc like in her garden, right? And she's like having a vision, and then we as the viewers like get to see the vision. It's like these like ghostly like apparitions here. I think stuff like that's pretty cool. So, if you're into that, then I would say 100% go for it. Maybe here, things to keep in mind are like, okay, let's see what we can do with this. So the one thing I would say, and, I see you have like a little diagram here, like this is, he's got the poison, she's got the poison to kind of like, hey, look, take the poison. I think this looks like a candle. That was like the first thing that I thought. So it's not communicating like poison necessarily. So there's a few things that we can change a little bit to make it, maybe like a little bit clearer to read. So in the story, and this is, we can take some liberties with it, but in the story, like when Juliet is pretend dead, she's in a tomb, right? She's not like naked on the ground. But what you could do is like, I mean, we can run with this too, right? But actually having like a dress, like a flowing dress, there's some cool things that we can do with that. You could
That's
also,
not
if you
Juliet, right? Juliet dies after. That's the dude that Romeo kills before Juliet.
Oh, is it? And this is the tomb?
Yeah, it must be, right?
Oh, it's okay. It says depiction of the moment when Romeo falsely realizes the only way to
that's
beat Juliet
Juliet.
is to take
Wait,
the poison.
I thought Juliet dies after Romeo.
Oh no,
No,
this is
she's-
Juliet. This is Juliet.
she's-
No, because she
Oh,
takes
okay,
fake
sorry.
poison.
I'm
She's
just
sleeping.
don't listen to me. Don't listen to me. Oh, she's sleeping there. Okay, okay.
She's sleeping, and then he kills himself, and then she wakes up, and you know the rest.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
I haven't read
so
anything.
he-
all right, my bad.
You
I
did
did,
this.
honestly, that like that little Sparks Note video from like 20 years ago that I watched before this came in clutch. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I
like
think
I
watched
would
the
just
same one.
like if you revisit this idea, you could have like the tomb and have her like like dead here and these right next to her, and then there's the apparition or whatever. But anyway, we're not gonna get stuck on that. What I would say is you basically have a composition that's like a mirror, right? Like going diagonally across here, this is like this world of like fantasy and like the hereafter, and this is like real life and what's happening right now. So you kind of get to choose, they're kind of even right now. I would say, like, again, like what Devin was saying, it's like you can kind of choose to make it more about one or the other. So like you can reduce the amount of space, like you can cut it here, because there's nothing really here that we need. So you could like cut it here and make it more about, the promise of them being together in the afterlife, right? So that's an option. Or you could extend this and have more of this and then cut this off a little bit. So it's just like a vague little promise of like what could happen, right? So it's up to you. I would say for the purposes of this, we can, maybe we'll crop it like a little bit over here. When you create the frame around it, like, it looks like you're working digitally, just like make that straight just so that it doesn't, because here, it's kind of getting like a little too curved. That's kind of messing with like, you might fit in some stuff that then if you actually like, finally like put it in a painting, that's like going to get cut out. So, just, hold down your shift thing and just, make it actually straight for the actual boundaries of the picture. So let's go ahead and do that. I would say here, one thing we can do is like have her wearing the dress, and like everything in this apparition is again suggesting the kind of hereafter, right? Like the afterlife. And so maybe everything's like flowing up, like she's coming from the heavens, right? So like, her whatever she's wearing, like her dress and everything, her hair, like all of this is like almost like emerging from like the clouds, right? So maybe all of this stuff here trends up, and maybe there's like a little shadow here or something, but like, all of this is going like upwards, right? And maybe here with Juliet, because she's, in this reality over here, she's dead, well, pretend dead. Maybe like her dress and everything is like, flattened out into the ground, like just kind of like, spilling over. And this part right here feels a little separate from this. So maybe having like her hair spilling over here and having like some of her dress, like that kind of ties it together a little bit more, right? Again, a little bit more sauce to join these things together. We can come in here and say, okay, here's her, and, again, this could be her hair, this could be her arm, slumped over. This could be like, various little parts of her dress. And notice we create rhythms first, and then we're like, all right, what's gonna give us those rhythms? Like, what are we gonna make them out of, right? What parts can we maneuver or shift around to give us like that, those rhythms that we want, right? Those patterns that we're looking for here. So let's say here she's like, again, this kind of like collapsed mass, right? And then you have, again, this figure coming up here. Again, I feel like this looks, it's almost like creates like a little bit of a split where it's like you're looking at this, the poison here, and you're looking at this here, and you're looking at their faces. One thing you could do is like, it depends on what moment you want to show, right? And how exactly you want to show that moment. Because you could, have her handing him the poison, right? and he could be like just kind of like, you know, outstretched arm, kind of like receiving it. One way we could play it too is maybe that's like, you know, that's the moment of contact when she gives him, you know, the poison, right? You could also, you know, show the moment where he's maybe like, because here both of his arms are pointed toward the apparition, so like maybe that's like he's fully invested in, you know, doing this. But you could show a little bit of him being torn with like one arm still being here somehow, right? And maybe even like the face being like, you know, turned over here, right? And so he's like one half here, but maybe like his eyes are looking over here now, and he's like, oh my God, it's you. And he's like reaching out to her, right? Because this at least like, because the face is pointing one way, but the eyes are looking another way, like that can kind of show that he's like in between like this world and the next. You know, and then she could have like the poison here. We'd have to figure out what to do with this arm, right? Because it is kind of nice to have this like in this hand, but again, it looks a little bit too much like you know, like a candle. I forgot how to say candle. But you could also, I mean, you could even do something like have her with both hands in, you know, in her like palm, like presenting him with, you know, the poison, you know, like that. So it's like there's a bunch of ways that you could play this, right? And I would say in the beginning, make this like just extremely obvious, even with like little, you know, almost like emoji language, because we're very good at expressing like emotions through like text, like graphically by doing that, right? And so you can actually like use that same understanding that you have of how to communicate with people graphically, and you can translate that into this. And if it looks too cartoony, you just get some reference, and then you know, maybe dial it back a little bit. But you know, I think that's something that you can play around with there.
Sweet.
All right, should we
That's great.
go to the next one?
You running it down. How you guys feeling?
Good.
Good.
Do you guys
Also, someone did ask for the meatball cam at some point. Meatball has joined us. Cooper's up on our cabinet somewhere, but Meeple is here in spirit. He'll jump in and do some crits too. He's the most professional painter.
What do you guys think of my Discord? Are we feeling good about the next generation of painters?
I'm inspired.
You're inspired?
Yeah, this is great. Like, this is super cool. I think people are doing better than like they thought, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the comments are like very, you know, derogatory.
Yeah.
And you know, it just gets in the way. Like if you're just, you know, if you think of it as a positive journey, you know, it just makes everything go a lot faster.
Yeah, if you've made it like this far, you know, in like living as a person, like you probably learned most of the things that you need to do this. You just need to like repurpose them. Like the first skill that you master, whatever it is, even if it's like feeding yourself, right? Like a lot of the ideas from that are transferable. So it's not like you're starting from nothing, right? Like you're starting from this kind of common base of knowledge, and it just so happens that it has like different applications, but you do it all with the same brain and all that. Like just as a final note on that, like you were not given a choice about whether you were going to learn how to write, and yet you did, right? And so you learned how to express all kinds of ideas, from the most mundane to the most poetic, through graphic symbols and little lines, right? So, okay, you have a basis of like being able to express yourself graphically with lines and symbols and dots and whatever, and to be able to get out what's inside of you and communicate it to somebody else. This is just lines that are a little bit different, right? But you already have a basis of graphical communication that you use pretty much every day.
Yeah, and
so what's
like,
different about this?
And there's like it can be an emotional roadblock because it is so similar, but like when being an artist is part of your identity and you want to be an artist so bad, there's so much pressure on like every line and decision that really it probably wasn't like when you were learning how to write. So for me, at least, an important part of like the art journey was recognizing that the stakes that I feel were real, because it's like, you know, if I suck at this, well, like there's my whole identity, and like nobody wants to feel that. So you could just acknowledge that, like, okay, the stakes are high, like then you can get to work. But yeah, I do think it is worth acknowledging that and not making yourself feel like, well, there's no reason to be anxious about this or like
Yeah.
scared of making work, because there's really good reasons, but you just acknowledge them and you do it anyway.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, make it not about you. Make it as do this thing where it's like you're working in the service of the idea. The idea wants certain things from you, and I think that the less you think about, like your self-image or whatever, like being at stake, the more free you'll be to actually follow, like, the interesting little places that your brain will take you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one last bit on this is like all the advice that I give on this channel is just like advice that I need all the time. Like I just kind of talk about what I'm learning, and I think that people one of the biggest mistakes I see is that people they wait way too long to start this stuff. But really, if composition is just the basis of everything, if everything is composition, then you need to start it at the beginning, not after you master the skills. So I think that you got to get comfortable with that feeling.
A big part of my teaching too was like I felt like I had to write stuff down to like remember it, to keep it in my brain, and like just making notes for myself basically. So it's worth like you're never too early in the process to start teaching also, because that's just it's how you learn it for yourself. So yeah, I pulled up Toko's.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is awesome. I don't really have a lot to say about the actual kind of composition, like the sheet music itself, like the bones of the picture are totally there. Like it's really, really awesome. There's this really nice sweep to this. And then maybe there could be like a little bit of detail here on the wall, just kind of counterbalance all of this. But I think you have that like blocked out enough. And Ramon and I have talked about like these Prix de Rome paintings in our class. These are like, it was the big contest that they would do in the 19th century. And they all use the same composition. Like they were not trying to reinvent the wheel. And it's really kind of the same as this. Like you have this big sweep and then maybe some detail over here. Nothing too crazy, but the simpler it is, like the more you can let the other stuff shine. I think of it like a pop song. You have a verse, you have a chorus, you have another verse. Like they all do it, but it's the details that make it different and interesting. Okay, so I think, just again, like this is really great. I saw the work that you did in your thread. Maybe I could pull it up too. You just take a look at the. Let's see.
Toko's been grinding this. He's probably put like the most hours into the composition.
See the value study. Yeah, you got these drawings, like totally on the right track. I love this, doing the costume, and it's all like you have the idea first. You didn't start with like, oh, I'm going to procrastinate. Like, I'm going to do a study of his ear because it's like safer. There's less stakes in that. You have like the actual reason to be doing these studies. There's this article like at the turn of the century where this guy's just complaining basically that like studies now don't mean anything. Like, there's no painting you're doing this for. So I think this is really cool that like your sheet music basically, it has the nice melody to it already. I think in terms of values, like that's the main thing that I think could be improved here. I just think you're doing too much work. Like you have basically a full range of value on every form. So I think you could think more about how light reacts on most materials, and most materials are kind of diffuse, and that means that they scatter the light. So instead of like, also like, so number one, like don't go all the way to white on your forms. Number two, if you do have a highlight, have it inside the form and not on the edge. Now, velvet can be like a counterexample to this, but it's really not going to go that bright. It would just get like maybe a little bit brighter on the edge and in the shadow. But I think, these kinds of types, usually they're not super shiny, like they're pretty matte basically. So the main thing I did was like, there's a light side and there's a shadow side, and just consolidating the values. Like, again, you're doing too much work. You're putting too many values into each form. So I'm thinking about, okay, this part of the leg is a cylinder. and this is the value of the tights and light, and then it goes to this value in shadow. But then her body here, like I see like the light's coming from this direction. Her body here is blocking the light. Therefore, there would be a cast shadow on top of this. Now, what cast shadows let you do, and this is one of the problems with doing like all of this prep work that you did, like stuff like this, like you want to show it all. Now you could do like more Renaissance type light. It's just going to be like, it's not like real kind of light. It's just going to be kind of color coded, almost like what Ramon was doing in his composition, like to kind of just have everything read as like a separate group. If you want to have more 19th century lighting, which is more naturalistic, things get lost, which means that, you know, this shape here, it's going to be found, and then all this, like from a distance, you know, there's nothing in there, but it makes it feel more real. So it's just kind of a hurdle to get over of like, oh, actually, like this, not every part is going to be the star of the show. If everything is the star of the show, then nothing is. So that's the main thing that I looked at here. I want to start losing things and consolidating things into groups. Also, like her face here, it's not facing the light. Like her hair is getting the light. Her face would be mostly in shadow. And I think that actually kind of works because this is a pretty depressing scene. So having her face be in shadow and like being lost into the wall and only her hair kind of getting the light, it really works for the story more than if we were seeing everything. Now you can get in there and put all your values and your details in there eventually. I kind of tipped her head downwards too a little bit. Like, but all the details in here would eventually be really, really minimal. Like, you know, 1 or 2 points on the slider here, like different to start describing, you know, what's happening. Let's see. So yeah, I think you could see also like I wanted the cloth here, like the white cloth, to read as a separate material. Whereas before, when everything was getting white to black, you can't have different materials. I think it's one of the things I wasn't reading originally, was the differentiation between like, okay, this is, you know, these matte kind of leggings, and then this is like flowy white cloth. Here's hair and here's skin. So you can kind of see the difference. Everything, you know, goes from the full range of value to organizing and consolidating values, so that you get differences reading. Another rule of thumb to kind of keep in mind, you can see I was doing in the background, is like, if you want to start modeling form, you can see I'm like, again, too many values back here. Like it's getting you're using too much of your budget. And if you use all of your budget on everything, you know, nothing looks like it should. So a rule of thumb, like, okay, it's all complicated. Try going darker instead of going lighter. I think it's just going to kind of like get you in a different mindset, because I think you're thinking like, okay, it's seeing light and it's going to get brighter. And then you start using your white paint on everything because, oh, this is facing the light, this is facing the light. And then everything, you know, nothing looks like the right material. So what you're doing is you're in an arms race. Like you keep pushing up your value until you can't go any further. It's the end of your budget. So instead, you could see, go darker in some places. Like here, if there's going to be a shadow, go darker. Don't start putting in highlights here to start showing the form. Try using shadows more to do that.
So one way that I like to teach people this, or if they have a composition sketch, is, you know, I tell them, go take, you know, like a Titian painting, and then go take, you know, a Poussin painting, or go take a Bouguereau painting or whatever, and then, you know, take 5 values or 4 values from each of those and apply that lighting or that value scheme onto your painting and see what those different, you know, value schemes look like, you know, on each painting.
Yeah, this is why it's great to, like, after you do something like this, then go do a master study and see like, oh, how did they organize their values? So you make the attempt and then you refine it and then you can study. So like, don't prepare like, okay, I'm going to do 1,000 master studies and then do mine. Well, it's probably going to help a little bit, but the better thing is like, well, try it and then do a master study and then refine it and then do another study. So you're actually learning and applying. Really, like, procrastination is like the worst thing you can do. Because again, what is composition? Decision making. And procrastinating is avoiding making decisions. So, you know, you can see, you know, the problem there. I think also you sent me one more. I can just do a really quick one.
Yeah, that's
for
this one.
because stuff we've already talked about. Whose was this? Carmen. And yeah, you're doing really cool 3D stuff. So when you're using 3D, now you're basically a cinematographer or a photographer. You have your scene and where is the best place to put the camera. We have the benefit of 3D of like, doing whatever you want versus photography where, if you're on the street, you can't really control everything, which makes it kind of a unique challenge. But here, yeah, it's really like being a cinematographer and like you're organizing a set and like so you're thinking more about objects here than you are about composition abstractly. That's why like you have to kind of train your brain to get into that abstract mode when you're looking at this. And just looking at this, there are some abstract problems here, and it's really the same kind of impulse that we have to make things even. So number one, there's a setting in Blender. I don't know, is it French? Passepartout or something?
That's so funny that you say that. There's a game
Is
called
it?
Passpart. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I always say Passpart out, and everyone makes fun of me.
Yeah, I don't know. So hopefully I'm not completely wrong there.
No, I think it's Passpart out. I checked. You're
Okay,
good.
so not French.
Yeah, it's Passpart out. Trust me.
Okay, so it makes this darker, basically, like your border, and it can help you see your composition a little bit better. And I always make it like close to black, basically, so I can really tell what I'm doing. And when you do that, okay, look at this, completely halfway, and then we're splitting this, like, there's this, and then there's this, and we have this triangle here, and like things just feel kind of awkward with how they are arranged. So when you're moving your camera around, you have to look at it like a flat image with abstract shapes. And you really got to get into the zone, into that flow state of like, okay, I'm moving the camera, and when do these elements align to tell my story? And right now, again, this triangle that this is making is like halfway, splits it in half. This splits it in half. Everything just keeps being split in half, static upon static upon static. So also like, yeah, this triangle, like when we make this into an abstract kind of modern art, it's like it's on this line, so things are kind of like tangent to other things. Yeah, be in that abstract mode while you're doing this. And you can see in the finished painting, those things still kind of are a problem. Like it's split in half. And like this is a really interesting thing. And part of me just wants to like kind of prop this in and have a more interesting kind of arrangement of of what's happening here, and maybe move this up a little bit. It's that same thing of like, oh, I'm drawing a forest and I'm making everything, completely even. You just want to try and break that. And I think, something like that could tell the story a little bit better. If something isn't adding, if it's not contributing, it's taking away. And again, this is true with all art. If you have ingredients in the soup that are not making it better, it's making it worse. If you have stuff in a song, if you have a saxophone line and it's like, it's not adding to your ballad, like get rid of it. So yeah, that's for this one.
That's great. How you guys feeling? We want to do like a couple more, maybe a couple more, Matt, and then call it good.
I'm good for one more.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Here, let me hop
I gotta make one of you guys do mine. Oh great, Ramon can do this. Yeah, all right, Devin, we can bring it back to the old days. Can you do mine after?
Wait, what's that?
Can you do
yours?
Yeah, I have one in there. I sent it this morning. It was just pretty low down the thread.
Let me
and then Ramon can do this one while we while you look at that.
Okay.
All right, so here, just real quick, like again, this story is there's a bunch of stories like this all over the place. This is The Lovers of Teruel. It's a Spanish story from like the 12th century. It's literally the same thing. He arrives a day late for them to get married, so she's married to some other dude, and he takes poison, and she goes to his funeral and kisses him, and then she dies because there was still poison on his lips, and et cetera, et cetera. There's also this sculpture, commemorating the lovers, which is, I think, how Romeo and Juliet ends. They like make statues of them and put them side by side or whatever. Anyway, So this is like good inspo for like different ways that people have treated these stories. This is Paolo and Francesca, also an Italian story, basically the same thing, right? The specifics are a little different, but I like this painting a lot. This is by Gaetano Previati. Basically, like, if you're worried about like proportions and heads being too big or things being too small or whatever, like, take heart when you look at this painting, because like, nothing is like quote unquote the right size here. Like, her head's too big, you know, that hand's huge, his feet are really big or whatever. The bed doesn't even necessarily like continue probably the way it should, but it's like the emotional impact is there though. You know, like something really like, you know, touching is sort of happening. It's almost like they're one figure together, and like, you know, they're both dying, right? It's like you don't get to see his reaction to the dagger, but you get to see hers. It's almost like it's stabbing her through the heart as well. And what I like about this is we do have a sketch that Previati did before he did the final painting, and it's like, look, there's no couch, there's no like anything yet, but like that central part of like almost them being like stabbed at the same time, right? And like almost like her feeling through him, like that's already there, that's already locked in. You can build the other stuff around this, right? But you know, that's kind of having like the sort of peak emotional moment, like having your priority kind of locked in. So I chose these two here because, you know, they, I think, show again, sort of like the last two, like slightly different facets of, you know, their relationship, right? This is like, you know, when they're sort of like lost in each other's eyes, and like everything is, you know, sort of like as good as life gets in a lot of ways, right? Whereas this is a scene of tragedy over here. And so here, let's go ahead and take a look. This is, I believe, oh, Vilma, okay? This is really beautiful. I saw the, you know, the kind of process stuff leading up to this. I think that was really well worked out. You know, it's, let's see, let me pull it up. Very, very noodly, you know, not doing too much to start it off, which again, I think is a smart way to go about it. It makes things more manageable. Here we go. So, you know, here's a little color sketch, you know, again, kind of, you know, focusing in on them. You know, here are some of the development sketches. Stuff like this, I think, is perfect. That's like exactly what you want to do, you know, in figuring this out. Again, don't overinvest in this stuff. You can do little, you know, little character studies like this too, you know, to kind of hone in on the idea a little more. Again, that's not too far off from that, like, that Previati painting that we saw. So here, a couple of things. Like, again, I think this is a gorgeous image. I like the color scheme a lot too. I think that's really effective. I really like the way they're looking at each other. Like, that just, like, it feels very, like, genuine. Like, it feels like a thing that people would do, right? I'm seeing now that their fingers are interlaced. We could probably clear that up a little bit just to make it easier to see. Wouldn't be like a huge, you know, like particularly difficult thing to do. Because at first it just kind of seems like his hand is just, like, he's just kind of hover hands over here, and we can't tell like whose hand this one is, right? So what I would do is like, look, just take some of the sleeve here, you know, so basically in your head, you know, think of it as like, okay, you got a tube here, you know, and you got like a tube here, right? And that, you know, gets you the hand right there. So it's like bang, bang, and then hand like that, okay? And just show us a little bit more of the sleeve. You know, there's almost like a little bit of like exposition that needs to happen here, right? So we might move that around a little bit later, but just for the time being, just like a little bit more of this, and then, you know, pull this out. You know, pull out a little bit more of like his sleeve here. Maybe move this up, you know, to show that it's like, you know, his arm, right? Again, just make that like a little bit clearer. Maybe there'll be like I don't know, a little bit of light on this here, just something to, you know, again, kind of clarify the space there. You know, maybe like differentiate their skin tones a little bit more, or like, I don't know, people painted their nails back then, but like just a little something to make it like different, right? I think that would be good. I really like this of like, you know, just the tenderness of it all, like her kind of like, you know, supporting him. This, I think, is a really nice little detail, just him hanging off the railing. It kind of shows like how reckless he is, which is, part of what gets them in trouble, like period. One thing I'll say is that the composition just kind of seems to like end here, right? It just kind of seems like there's like, here's the most important thing, like Devin was saying, here's like the center of gravity. There's stuff sort of going around them, but then it just kind of like, bloop, just kind of ends here. I would say like, if we're kind of really focusing in on this moment here between the two of them, we probably don't really need a whole lot of this like vertical space up here, right? Unless it was like for like a commission and like, you had some requirement to fit it to that aspect ratio. But even then, I would probably, maybe get it like to be more of a close-up shot. So like Devin said, thinking like a cinematographer. But in this case, what I would do, just kind of simplest solution, is make this like just a bolder, longer, horizontal format. Also, I would say like, if you're gonna put your name in it, I would probably make it like more formal and maybe like hide it a little bit more. Like this has enough contrast that it kind of takes you out of the painting, And so I would maybe like hide it in the flowers here. But you know what? Like you have such a lyrical way of going about your work that I think you are primed for being the kind of artist that has some kind of like monogram. So not even like your name, but like some kind of like, I don't know, you got a lot of V's and K's in here. Like, you can figure something out in there, like a stamp or something like that you can put on stuff, because so much of this is so like graceful and just kind of, I'm just sort of like Instagram brained. I want to say it's like really like aesthetic, And so I think the text like this just kind of really yanks you out of that. So something that's kind of like, again, a little bit more flowing. Maybe having like, okay, if you have all these flowers here, I think that's great. Maybe have like a little bit more of that along the path here. Maybe have like, some more of these flowers here. But maybe, you could sneak in like, maybe like a couple of dead flowers, over here, or just like something, that's like maybe a little, you don't have to do that, but like, you could have something that's like a little like foreboding or sort of like, foreshadowing what's going to happen. These clouds, I think we can like bend to our will a little bit more, because what you have going here, Vilma, is like, you basically have, you got your characters, right? You got your planet here, right? This is them. And then you've got like the world kind of like revolving around them, right? Which I think is really effective. That's really well done. The clouds could do a little bit more of that, right? Here, they're just a little bit more like arbitrary. Like, I mean, this is good. They're kind of like leading down to them here. But I think here, it looks like just kind of like a, sort of like a grid. And so I think we can get a little trickier with that. We can sort of disguise that more. So maybe we take some of this color here, and this can be like, you maybe don't want a lot of activity here, but maybe we can come in and without using too much contrast, right? Staying within our budget, since this is, the most important stuff over here. We can maybe do some of that, keep this cloud really big, this one's medium, this one's small. That might be kind of cool to have like little bits of this cloud here and then like a little bit here, so it conforms to that path that we're creating, right? And so I think the kind of honing in on it, would be really effective here. Let's see. Maybe working on some of the, kind of like physical aspects of this, in the sense of like, like if she's sitting down here, right, and like this is one of her legs and that's coming in, and like her butt's right here and here's the other leg, then she needs more of this to sit on. Like that probably should be a little lower over here, right? So let's go ahead and bring that down a little bit. Again, you don't want it to be something where it's like distracting, right? That like the viewer's like, hey, what's she sitting on? That, And so, maybe something like that. Maybe like some, little like contact shadows, little like occlusion places where she touches down. Probably give us like, a shoe or a foot or like, just something here. One of them has to be grounded, right? She's probably the more grounded one because she's the one that doesn't actually take poison initially, right? And so he's kind of the one that drags her down with him. But again, I think this is really well done here. I I really like that. Like having like his foot sort of like, wrapped around, the railing. Um, Maybe straighten out some of this. Obviously, it can be like a curved railing and stuff, but I think you kind of have to do that a little bit more intentionally. Maybe this is kind of this is like creating sort of like a little weird tangent here. So maybe we just like, I don't know, take some of that away, play around with that a little bit. So maybe it's not like entirely parallel to that leg, maybe something like that. And let's see, maybe he'd probably be casting a shadow, down onto here. So just getting like a little bit of that, again, maybe like little contact shadows there as well.
I just realized it reminds me of that Tadema painting with the flowers in the foreground.
Oh yeah, I was thinking that too. Yeah, the painting that Jake's talking about is it's actually like Devin and I like geeked out about this painting too because it's one of our favorites.
So good.
There's also one where they're lying on a bench. There's one that's even more similar. I'll try and find it.
Oh yeah, please. Yeah, the one we're talking about right now is the Flowers of Heliogabalus. This guy was like some Roman emperor that I forget like why, but he like just crushed people under all these rose petals or whatever, or like flower petals. That's like the most poetic way to die. But yeah, it's just like it's just gorgeous, like. And it's interesting like how odd you can get with this, where like this is basically like an abstract composition. It's like it's a lot like a Gustav Klimt or something, where you have like all this pattern, and then you have like fully dimensional figures emerging out of the soup.
You can find the oil sketch that he did too. You can see how he like simplified all of this at the beginning.
Yeah, let me see
I want to see that. I haven't seen that.
Where was that one?
Just search for sketch. It'll probably come up. Otherwise, I can find it.
Oh, yep, that worked.
Oh, it's different too.
There's actually a couple of them. There's a rare one.
Oh, really? Wait.
Yeah,
this is one of them here.
They're not similar. They're not different enough where it's like maybe it'll come out.
But that's good for people to see. Like again, you go through like different. This is just the final painting. You go through like different ideas, and even someone like Almatadama would like scrap and redo paintings and like try again, and like it just there's not like that whole idea that someone's just like an art god and like they never like mess anything up, and everything they do is just like a hit, is like that's a myth. That's not real. That doesn't happen for anybody. You get little glimpses of it, but it's like no one lives like that. But anyway, there's some things you can kind of do that are less important. Again, I think you did a really good job of like locking in on this, like just the most important aspects of this. One thing you could do is like, you could put in like a column here or something just to kind of like close off this space and not make it like too interesting, or not call too much attention to it. But also it kind of creates a more intimate feeling. Like you're kind of it's almost like you're spying on them, right? And something like that, is can be pretty effective. One thing you could do, again, if we're going like the kind of foreshadowing aspect, is like if you have these like bits of railing and stuff, you can have it continue like over here and almost make it feel like they're like in prison, or like they will be, right? Like they're like trapped in like some kind of like cage that they can't get out of. And those are like little subtle things that you can do to, again, like squeeze more story out of just like a single static image. But yeah, I really like that. I think that's really beautifully done. And this one over here, like, nice. I think this is really poetic. I like. What's that?
I really like this one. I like the pose is really interesting.
I do too. Yeah, I think that's awesome. Like, I think, and it's interesting because it's like it's fairly like synthetic. Like, well, or I don't know actually. Like, I don't know if people die like this. You know what I mean? But it's like, but visually, it's like it's interesting, and it doesn't really like take away from the from the image too much. So like, you don't have an obligation for everything to be like naturalistic, or everything to be like exactly how it would happen in real life. I think this idea of this kind of like tangle of limbs with them is really cool. His hand just kind of like limp like that, and like the foreshortening of it. Great job. I think that's super cool. Like, these are just great ideas. handling all these limbs and not, you know, falling into the trap of making a bunch of them like parallel or kind of like too similar or too monotonous is hard to do. And you did a really good job with that. I think you solved that really well. The intertwining of them, like, again, I think that's really, really cool. Here, again, you kind of have to, like, again, design some stuff around them, like have things that, you know, have some more sauce, have something that links all of this together, right? So like something happening that's like, you know, something encircling, something tying them back into the other stuff, right? So that could be like, again, the slumping over, you know, that sort of like idea of like them dying. Like maybe he's wearing a cape, you know, maybe you have something that like spills over, right? Something that even more than his body can shows how like, you know, he's dead, you know, like maybe something with her dress too, like, you know, spilling down, like just, you know, something that kind of shows like almost that they're like returning to the ground, right? Like I think something like that could be effective. You know, maybe there's like little things that you could do here, like I don't know. There could be, well, I was gonna say like maybe some of her hair, maybe he's like clinging to like a little lock of it or something. Or maybe like, what about this? You have some of her hair spilling down here, and here are his fingers, and it's like she's slipping through his fingers, right? Like, or his life is his life and her are slipping through his fingers, right? I think that is something that, you know, again, small little things that could, you know, work to, you know, to add to a really strong idea already. Here, I just noticed the dagger here. The dagger, I think, is too integrated into them. So like the dagger is a thing that's like a kind of foreign object that's like, you know, pulling them further apart, right? So like if you have it like this, it's going to be hard to tell that it's a dagger. I would say have it silhouetted against something, have it falling like over here if you're going to have it falling, or just have it like already, you know, that it already fell, right? It's really hard to show things mid-motion in a drawing or a painting. Usually you have to show like the beginning of an action or the end of it, right? So like the knife falling like this kind of feels like it's just sort of sticking there, right? So I think like either the knife is like just falling out of her hands or it already fell, right? But, you know, it's like if you have someone running, right? Like maybe you have like, okay, here's the person like, you know, running there, you know, and like, let's say like, I don't know, this leg is in front here, then you have them like running over here, and then, you know, the legs switch or whatever, right? But when the legs are crossing, like that doesn't look like they're running. That looks like they're hopping on like a pogo stick, right? So generally speaking, this is not a rule, but like generally speaking, actions read more clearly in a static image if you show the very beginning of it or the very end of it. Usually the middle of the action is a little hard to read, hard to communicate that it's like actually moving. So anyway, and again, just like kind of think of like, again, what else you could have in here that would like tie them into their environment. And, you know, just like, I would say like start to actually commit to a, you know, a way of closing this up, right? So like having like in the final comp, like having, you know, an actual frame on it. Again, similar to what you have here. You know, so this would be a moment where, because you're basically at the stage where like you have like this much of it, right? So then you can start to like maybe like take a break, do a little more research, like, you know, see like, okay, like what environment could I put them in, right? Like where could I place them? Where could this action be happening? One thing you could do is you can make little clay models of them, right? And use that to help you like figure out more realistic lighting. You can do that in Blender. You can do that traditionally. People that I would recommend that you look at, because you're a limb tangler, right? Like you are finding the poetry in like their limbs kind of like, you know, locking together. That's great. That's super cool. A lot of my favorite paintings like work on that principle. Here's an example of another Lord Leighton where it's like, this is a limb tangle painting, right? Like these ladies, for whatever reason, there's a python wrapping around them. How did he figure out a lot of this? He figured it out by making a sculpture, right? Simple noodle people, you know, simple little folds, nothing too complicated, right? Looks like he went a little further, you know, just for the indulgence of it, and looks like he enjoyed doing it. But, you know, You don't have to come up with everything like completely out of your head. Like not that many people actually do that. And usually it's a pain in the ass and it doesn't look that good. So a lot of the time, these people in the past would, rely on like making little maquettes like this one. This is like a little box of wood with like little clay people, and then that was used to make this painting. People would have mannequins, people would have props. This is not just me, having these things in my studio. This is literally how people made paintings before. Anything that you look at, you're like, oh my God, how could they get all those details and all whatever? Well, they're not making it up either. It's like they have references. So anyway, yeah, really, really good. And here, I'll unshare.
And I will, in turn, share my screen.
Is Jake on the chopping block now?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Everyone loves to watch me suffer. Yeah, show them how you used to treat me, Devin.
Okay, so yeah, you'll never make it as an artist. That's the takeaway. No, this is great. I think this is a really cool composition. Again, you got that like kind of limb entangled thing going on where this reads as like one complete gesture. It's really cool. So I have minor critiques. I think the first thing that jumped out at me is just the perspective of this dagger. Like we really want to get the ground plane to read. I think most of my critiques are like drawing based. I think it's going to help two things: drawing based and considering each form a little bit too much in isolation in terms of how you're applying your values. So number one, yeah, dagger more in perspective with the ground. I'm just kind of imagining that there's more of this compression like this. So if the dagger is like that, it's breaking the perspective of the scene. So that goes back to what I said about like perspective is one of these tools that can help you communicate more clearly. So like the dagger being kind of out of perspective, the main idea is still there. It's not like a huge deal, but you fix it and it's like, okay, the grammar is like slightly better. Okay, so then that brings us to some more drawing things. Let me see. Let's get to everything I did. Group this here.
Oh, I love the rug. That's really smart.
Yeah, I think that was like the main thing, was it just didn't feel like anything was grounded. So about the face, little drawing thing. Okay, where is the ear? Like just where the ear is like, that's the only information we have about the tilt of the head. Kind of lowered where the brow is and think of this as like a cube, basically. And yeah, like sunglasses here, this is where the ear is. So lowering that ear, it's just, you moving these shapes around to better, more clearly communicate the drawing, what's happening with the form. Also, look at this leg. Like, I know it's sticking out in space, but this just kind of like half in light thing is a little bit awkward. It's clunky, like it's that. It doesn't tell us much. So if you think about each form, like too much on its own, that's what starts to happen. It's like everything has light, everything has shadow. Why don't we throw part of this leg into shadow? And you can see like, okay, the shin is like bending backwards a little bit in space. Maybe that is mostly in shadow, and then we get to link more values together. And we get like the foot just kind of poking out. And yeah, that like shapes in isolation that you can kind of lose and find, it makes it feel a lot more convincing. I think, started to think a little bit more about the form of what's happening here, like with her hip kind of pushing out. Again, just simple cylinder. I also thought like later on you could put like a belt to show kind of how her hips are twisting. Necklaces, belts, those all really help to show form. Or he could wear really cool sunglasses. Like that's another thing. But, it definitely changes the mood of this.
Okay, I was looking at a lot of like Leighton paintings for this. Like I really love kind of like those sweet, sappy, romantic paintings, but I also wanted to like show that like there's kind of some sense of like impending doom coming for that.
Yeah, and that how all of the values here are like transitioning into this blackness, like that's perfect. Our eye is like kind of moving in this direction, and it just the darkness kind of envelops them. So perfect. You got that kind of like visual pun happening. So yeah, this is clearly communicating. And then okay, again, I just think that this part was missing. So why don't we have a carpet? Because just like necklaces and belts, carpets have patterns on them and they go in perspective. So you can have all sorts of detail happening, like, like a Van Eyck rug or like, what's his name? Vermeer or something. You can go crazy with the pattern here. Because everything, you have this really like these big blocks of simple value. Having some complexity is going to kind of like activate that. Yeah, if you have simplicity, complexity will activate it. If you have complexity, simplicity will activate it. The other thing was I lowered the value of the dagger because I don't think it's going to reflect that much light. And also, if it's that bright, it's just kind of like on the nose of like foreshadowing. It's just like a little bit too.
Another thing you could do as like a kind of story within a story is like having the curtain there and like that dark space behind them, sort of like it creates a frame within a frame.
Yeah.
And you can have like in that period, like people would have just like big tapestries and stuff. So you could have like a tragic scene unfolding like in the tapestry behind them.
Yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, it's not something that people would notice immediately, but if they keep looking at it like, oh wait, shit, it's like a thought bubble almost.
Then we can get some abstract shapes happening in here that like are going to be a secondary read, and it's gonna because I didn't know what to do with this, but you're right, that can link all that stuff together. So here's again like a demonstration of composition. Ramon said, "Oh, tapestry, like that's a great idea." Sometimes you have to like just kind of sit with a problem and it'll like come to you in the shower or something. But here, once you say like, okay, how am I going to do that? I'm not thinking about figures. I'm thinking, what shapes do I want here that are to kind of like be interesting and lead me around? So I'm thinking very abstractly. So either you go on the left side of your brain and you're very concrete, or the right side of your brain. I don't know which is which. It's probably all fake anyway. But just as an example,
yeah, but this is also part of like the conversation that you can have like with yourself or with like other people. Like one thing that I found is actually like, having like a community and having like a group of friends that you can like talk to about this stuff. Like Devin, Jake, and I like riff off of each other like a lot of the time, and it's really helpful. Like, for instance, like the reason why I thought of the tapestry thing is, well, I mean, I literally have a tapestry like back here, but Devin said the rug, and he said pattern, and I was like, oh, pattern. Oh, sometimes tapestries have patterns, and sometimes they tell little stories, right? And like, again, that's something that it's not just like grinding it, like drawing and moving your hand all the time. It's like it's just thinking. So like sometimes you do need to kind of let things like sit a little bit and just like cook for a minute or two or a day or whatever. Cook. Yeah, exactly.
I thought I could quickly just kind of like scroll through just so everybody gets a chance at like a little bit of critique. Great. I could just quickly kind of comment, or Ramon if you want to comment too.
Yeah.
Just this is cool. Yeah,
I like the foreshortened Romy. That's actually pretty sick.
Yeah, this is very ambitious and really cool. I think like now that you have this, like you could make a little model or take a picture of yourself in that pose. You get like a little bit more specific with it. I think like the way that you're thinking about the forms of the head here, I think you can do that more like for this figure here. He's feeling a little flat. Like get more planes on that. Also like. You're going really dark with the eyes here. It's giving that very kind of stylized anime look. Like if you're taking in the whole scene, her eyes are like, it's not going to be that dark. So try blocking things in like with a little bit more similarity to everything else. Like try not to have things change too fast, or it's going to feel like, if you're listening to a song and it's all of a sudden gets really, really loud and then really quiet, it's like, whoa, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, it's like jarring. I like the Reaper in the back. Like, sorry, just one real quick thing. Like, but I don't think you have to separate them out that much. Like, I think if it's like too obvious, it becomes kind of like it's kind of like played out. If you have it just like integrated into like the shape behind it, just having like the the scythe like silhouetted against like some light thing, and just like a little glimmer of like a little bit, so that that it's a figure. I think that's like more effective. Like you can tone that down a bit.
Yeah, have this all be dark and it'll do the same thing as in Jake's painting. So, it's like great, like draw your figures, construct things, but then when you're composing, lose them, lose shapes into other shapes. Again, it will kind of
have like the shadow like advancing over them. Maybe like the shadow's like covering Romeo because he's already dead, and it's like it's like a tide coming in, like about to engulf her too.
Really dark with the blood. I think it's a little on the nose, like with the shape of the blood. I think I would simplify that because the figures are like, this is so cool.
Yeah, that's
I think it
awesome.
almost takes away from it. I would simplify this and have it be a little more subtle and what you're doing, because yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, really great work.
Yeah, maybe like a little bit of blood starting to come out, like it just
Yeah, just a little
like it
bit.
just happened.
um for this, we talked about like framing things. I think it would really help to have like a boundary of like, what is your canvas size? And then, okay, where is the head in relation to that? Yeah, other than that, I think like just general proportion stuff, like, a hand generally is going to be like the same size as your face, like if you open it, like Ramon is doing right now. So just paying attention to that stuff. Also, like things being perfectly in profile, you really have to like make that look very intentional. So try like rotating the head a little bit, try having it be a little 3/4 and challenge yourself to not have these kind of flat shapes.
Yeah, and you're doing a lot of drawing. Like again, maybe try making some little noodle people out of clay and just like play around with them. Just move them around so that you can't make any details, but you just get to focus on like how they're interacting in their body.
Yeah, and because noodle people are going to help you not think, oh, eye, nose, mouth.
Yeah.
It's going to help you think round form, tilted in space, a certain angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. Like this is getting
That's cool. Yeah.
center line. You can feel that center line. You can feel the center line. I really love this. I would think about more, because it's in a square right now, trying to think more about how you're going to actually compose this within the canvas, and try adding values, and remember to lose the work that you did into your values, because this is really well constructed. Cool. I think you could be more ambitious with like your overlapping, the actual, because okay, what's the gesture that's happening? It's just kind of like a swoop right here from corner to corner. So your modern art version of this painting, these aren't people. You're a little too far on the these are things side of thinking. Think more, I don't know, just touchy-feely art, making shapes, see what happens, then start thinking a little bit more about how can I make those shapes that work into things? Because you can definitely do it. These have form. But I think you're on that side of like, the painting is telling you what to do, or the drawing is telling you what to do. You're not totally in charge of this yet, and that's just a decision that you make, basically.
Can I?
Yeah, and think about like.
something?
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Ramon. I might be a little bit on the side of excess, but like to make mine, like I did so many tiny little sketches, like working out poses and how I want them and where they're, things are gonna go. Like doing just small stuff over and over and over again, instead of putting all of your effort into like one thing. Is super, super helpful. So I really recommend
it helps like shape.
It's fun too.
It's fun. Yeah.
After you do like a bunch of them, you feel less self-conscious, and you're more just like, okay, I just got to serve the idea basically, and I'll do what I have to do to get.
And you get more unhinged, which is actually a good thing here. Like
exactly, yeah.
You have to get it out.
Ramon, do you have any?
Yeah, this one's cool. Like I like how you're sort of like collapsing like into her basically. I would say that like a lot of the movement and the kind of easier flow that you have in that like smaller sketch, like that if you just go to the next image, like you don't want to lose that. Yeah, like the movement that you have in that like top one.
Yeah,
you
I like
don't
the bottom
lose
one
that.
too. Like there's some cool stuff happening like here that you're really losing with this. Like front view, like just. That's more interesting to me.
Yeah, that's really, it's like almost like breaking the fourth wall. Like she's kind of like appealing to the viewer. Like that's awesome. And the way that you're breaking up the space there, I think is really effective. So it's like, think of it this way. Like when you're making a final, it's not like all of a sudden you have to get like really uptight, right? It's just like, it's like taking your small sketch, you make it bigger, you get to fit more stuff in there that might be interesting. And maybe you like refine a few things, you get a little bit more research or whatever, but the way that you approach it doesn't have to be like, oh no, now it's serious. Now I have to like, forget everything that I was doing before.
For these, you're thinking too much about anatomy. You're thinking too much about figures. Like draw an aspect ratio, like a frame, make some shapes inside of it, try and get some feeling and gesture. Then you can build this up. Like this is really nice in here, but this is too far down the line to be thinking about
Yeah.
right now, basically.
Yeah, brain smooth out that brain, the empty thoughts.
Yeah, same for this. Like this has more better gesture. This is better, but I still think you're thinking like, you don't want to be thinking about like shoulder right now. I think there's more things to but yeah, this is I like what's happening here.
Oh, that's cool. I like all the research for the costumes and everything. That's pretty sick.
Yeah, I think like to kind of use that research, try thinking more abstractly. Again, think about the planets and gravity. Because if you map that out, it's like everything is evenly spaced. Here's a planet, here's a planet, here's a planet, here's a planet. It makes this like parallelogram, and every point of interest is an equal distance away from every other point of interest. And that's again just like you're drawing a forest and you accidentally make every tree, equally spaced.
Yeah, like perfectly spaced, like yeah, like I would say again, like just try messing around with some of that just some of that like little noodle people, like making like a little diorama or a little set. Drawing is barely about drawing. It's mostly about like ideas and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
The pencil to paper stuff doesn't matter that much. That's cool. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go first.
No, I was gonna say that's cool. I like this kind of like crypt, like sort of like feeling. Like they're kind of like, it almost looks like they're like locked in a cell.
Yeah. I like how they're like enclosed like this.
I like all this stuff too, where it's like there's again like this darkness like encroaching on them. Like I think that's pretty effective, even in just like a really simple like suggestive way of getting the that foreboding kind of feeling. I would say maybe bring them closer together or something. Like it kind of feels like if it's emphasizing the distance between them now that they're like not together anymore, then maybe make them more far apart. Or if it's emphasizing her like desperately clinging to him and like the last shred of life that he has left, then pull them closer together, right? But right now they're kind of like at a polite distance, like they're in line for something.
Okay, so this is awesome. This reminds me of that Matisse dancing painting.
Oh yeah.
I think it's like, I don't know if it's saying something unusual. Like it almost takes there's a levity to it in terms of this battle. Whereas in the play, I feel like it's a really kind of serious moment. So I don't know. What do you think, Ramon?
I kind of like it as like, the kind of engravings that you would get back then of like the danse macabre, like the dance of like life and death with like the skeletons like locked in arms, or like a Peter Bruegel type of thing.
Yeah.
So like I think that if you're gonna go with like the life is like absurd and like stupid angle, which there is plenty of absurdity in like the play, then you kind of have to ham it up like a little bit more. So like have like a skeleton dancing with them, and like Romeo and Juliet and like the parents are like, maybe they're like looking at each other angry while they're holding hands and dancing. Like whatever you do, commit to the bit. If you're like trying to go silly, go really fucking silly. If you're trying to be really serious and sad, then be really serious and sad. And then if you overdo it, dial it back.
Okay, we went over this.
Yeah.
I went over this.
Ooh.
Yeah, this is cool. It's almost like your frame is like an egg shape here. I think, all these hands and arms are evenly spaced. Like just always look out for evenly spaced things and things at tangents. So tangents need to be intentional too, because they flatten space. And you have the thumb here tangent with this. This is almost tangent with that, almost tangent with that. Get these hands overlapping instead. So either, like Ramon said, if you have tangents, commit to it and make it really flat. But here it's like, I don't feel like it's supposed to be this evenly spaced and this many tangents. And try and inject a little bit more gesture, like S curves into this. It's feeling a little bit stiff. Probably Ramon can explain more about how to do that.
Yeah, like make it like more, like a little bit more chaotic. Like, because part of what happens is like, if you don't like really like, again, commit to the characters, like don't think of like, how would this character dress it? Like, what clothes should I put on this character, or what pose should this character be in? Imagine that you are that person, and how would you act in that scenario? Like, I think that's more effective, because what'll happen is if you're looking at the story from a distance, like you don't actually feel like you're in it, but you're looking at it from afar, then you'll probably make things like really artificial. Like you'll put people like, again, evenly spaced politely next to each other, sort of like that. But that's not how people live, right? People are like, piling on top of each other and cutting each other off and whatever. I think the idea here is really cool. I like having like the whatever that circle thing is behind them, like whether the moon or whatever else. I like the hands kind of grabbing at them. I think that's awesome. But again, commit to it more. Maybe have hands from like every angle. Have hands crossing other hands. Have it feel overwhelming the way it would have felt for them.
Okay. Cool. I think is maybe too much perspective too early. When you plot out perspective like this, it's like, the perspective is using you instead of you using the perspective. It's really nice. I think you can just, if you had a camera, like I think you can find a better angle to convey what's happening. She's writing, we got a scene outside, but all this stuff here, if it's not adding, it's taking away. And this is why thumbnails are so important, because you did a lot of work here, and it's great work and it's great perspective, but is it in service of that composition? That helps to like save time, energy.
If they're sad, the whole room should be sad with them.
Right.
So like, what is something that would make, like, whether it's the lighting, whether it's the angle, what would make all those bookshelves feel sad, like they're in sympathy with the character, right? Because the environment is a character too, basically, right? So like, what's their acting? Like, what are they doing to add to the story? That's so sick. That's
they're almost, it's almost like a tattoo.
That's
really
just
cool.
what to say.
Yeah, that's awesome. That has like a really like iconic quality. Like it's static, but I think it actually works pretty well that it's static.
Yes, you're cooked.
I like the process of that too. Like,
yeah, this is really cool.
I like the one that's a little off center, like the one like right in the middle. Like that's maybe something to play around with. Yeah, like to the.
I like this too, like that.
Yeah.
Nice.
These are good ideas.
Yeah, really, really nice thumbnails. And any of these you could take to final. Okay, so I think a couple of things, evenly spaced things, totally central, and you could totally do that. I think this is starting to look intentional in terms of being symmetrical. Push it even further if you're going to do that. The other thing is your values. Again, you're using the same values on every form, like limit it and group them to different materials.
Yep.
Oh, this is
Matisse one got some value.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I just saw in the chat they were saying that like they're not like dancing, like it's Romeo breaking up a fight, like pushing their swords down.
Yeah, I know. I know that's the fight, but it really looks like that Matisse dance painting.
Yeah, they're like if they're fighting, it's too graceful. Like it needs to be more chaotic because it looks like it's like one of those like synchronized fights in movies, if that's the case. So like harder angles, right? Like just sort of like abrupt motions.
Or maybe just like a different perspective. Like if you were a little bit lower down, kind of looking up on them, it might feel a little more epic and dramatic. Like if you're looking down on them, it feels a little bit. It's not so like. It doesn't feel like a fight quite as much. So.
Yeah, I saw one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen, like compositionally, and it was like this top view of a fight, like a duel, and the shadows cast on the wall is where you could see that they were fencing, but the actual characters you see like just the top of their heads or whatever. Maybe something like that would be like a good little switch up.
I would pay more attention to your aspect ratios. Like this is like almost square, and square is pretty difficult. And like again, you're like almost centered. So either like push it to the center or push it a little bit further over, because the negative space is like an awkward ratio to the kind of active space. And again, that's like you're making soup and it's like your ingredients are in the wrong proportion. It's the same thing. So think about negative space and how big that negative space is and how it relates to everything else.
Yeah, and the drawing is really effective. Like the emoting of the characters is really good. You got to commit more to like the actual framing of the scene.
Okay,
that one we talked about. Yeah.
Oh, this is cool. Really nice, like shorthand for these figures.
Yeah.
I think like a little evenly spaced. I think you can make things like more overlap, like have this guy overlap this guy, push that a little bit more. But it's like it's almost there.
Yeah, think of their relationship to each other. Like people that are closer together, maybe like literally closer together. further apart, etc., to show like their relationship to each other. That's cool.
I think people are posting as we're doing this.
Just endless stream.
No,
Yeah.
no, they're not. They're not.
That's cool.
I really like these. I think these are cool.
Yeah, these are really, really good.
Yeah, keep going. Oh, this is
It's the same for okay.
same one.
Yeah.
Top
cool.
secret for the bird.
Yeah, same we talked about, like just the placement of things, or even make some things really big, make some things really small, make some things medium, like show the differences between things. Otherwise, this is pretty unique way to do this, and I really like this gesture that you have going here. But like this feels a little clunky with like all these shapes happening here, and like just like a big, it's like rectangle. It's like all these neat curves, but then it's like rectangle and kind of interrupts it. We went over this.
Also, like when you set up like a story, or like you create an image, like you are making it, like think about your audience, who you're making it for. I saw like in the chat, people were saying like that sword fighting is dancing. I'm not gonna know that, and I'm not gonna like it's like you're not gonna be there to explain that to like every single person, and I'm not gonna be the only person who doesn't know that, right? So it's like you have to sort of pitch things depending on your audience. If it's an audience that's like literate in like medieval European martial arts, then sure, but it's like if it's for the general public consumption, then you have to take that into consideration.
For this one, I would just say make a frame that's not your sketchbook page. Make sure you know what the aspect ratio, because like I don't think you're thinking about this negative space here. Always have like the bounds of your canvas. Otherwise, I think there's cool stuff happening.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We went over this, right? Yeah.
Did we?
Yeah, we did. We went over this.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we went over.
That's the same person.
Yeah, those are the lead up to Vilma's painting. Yeah, so we went over that.
That's cool. Yeah, symmetrical is looking fairly intentional. I think you can push it even more because it's a little bit off balance. Like symmetrical, but there's weight here. Counterbalance that weight with something here. There's nothing else here. Yeah, Ramon, you want to take over?
Yeah.
I'll scroll and you can.
Yeah. So this one here, I noticed this before, like it just says like, here, like it says like too dark, Romeo. That's a question where it's like there isn't really like a right answer for that necessarily. Like, again, you have to ask yourself more like, what is it that you want out of this, right? Because, you can contrive any number of things in your painting. Like you could be like, oh, this corner of the room is darker because, I don't know, like a piece of cloth is blocking the light from, getting to something else or, whatever. So I would say like focus more on like what will create the mood that you want with this. And maybe here, like, again, I'm going to, keep advocating for like making maquettes and stuff. The space, behind them is not like super defined. It's like pretty ambiguous. I would say like, maybe try to figure something out. Like, again, you can make like just a piece of cardboard, put a grid on it, make some little clay people, move that around. That'll start to give you, a sort of better understanding of like how to place figures inside of a scene, how to deal with the environment as well.
I really like these bottom two.
Yeah.
I think that like, again, there's some awkward interaction between things up here. I like this because again, this is big and this is medium and this is small. The other ones don't really have that quite as much. So look at what's successful in this, and you got like arches to play with. You can use that.
Yeah, and make the people really mean it with their acting. Like if they're like about to like actually fight, like don't have it be like, hey, I'm going to fight you. Make it be like actually like getting in their face. Again, just kind of like commit to it a little bit more.
Yeah, we did
That's how it goes.
Ooh, I like this. I think that I would just like shift the perspective over a little bit, so it's like you get a little bit more of that 80-20 or 70-30 kind of ratio, because just this right here, it's like you can make it work, but it's like you see there's tension, like the pillar comes down and interacts with this, just like I would turn the camera just a little bit, like it's subtle stuff, it's like just a little bit more salt. Okay, so I think this is really nice. I think you're relying a little bit too much on the lighting that Blender is giving to you. It's a really powerful tool, which means like the more dangerous it is, basically. Your sense of value is really good, but I would use Blender once everything is like as good as you can make it from your head. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, like don't be afraid to like again season this stuff a little bit more. Like toss some other like some squiggles on there, like just something like some room decorations. You can
Yeah,
make them just squiggles and then figure out what they are as
and look at
objects
where the
after.
points of interest are. It's like here and then here and then here and then here, and it's all even. And again,
Mhm.
think like abstractly, like a cinematographer.
Yeah.
Because it was better in your sketch in terms of how these things were relating, and then the tool was so powerful. So yeah, just be careful of that.
Yeah, and oh, that's
This
cool. I
one's
like
cool.
I like that line in the back. I think here the main thing is like just I would probably crop this more because there's almost like too many scenes happening, right? There's those people having a conversation on the left-hand side, there's Romeo and Juliet here, and then there's like the people that are spotting the other people like in the background. So it sort of creates like a too much of like a split in focus. And things are kind of like a little too separate. It's like kind of like it's like imagine that someone plates your food and there's like a little bit of rice here and like a little bit of like something else here and a little bit over here and a little bit over there. Kind of like mush the stuff together a little bit more. But also when you have a single static image, try to just keep it to like one idea. If you try to say too many things with one painting, just make two paintings because it's each idea is going to water down the other one.
Yeah, I would think about how these things relate to the frame. I like that you drew the frame, but try like zooming in a little bit, maybe crop part of the foot, like get it closer to the action. Because all this stuff over here, like I like the sci-fi aspect, but it's like head and then pillar and then window, like get things more overlapping and not so separate. It's like this pillar is like splitting us off from like seeing the background. More thumbnails, more sketches.
Yeah. And again, just play around with it. Don't think of it as like work. Don't think of it as like,
Like this is a great example. These are
yeah, that's awesome.
fantastic. Like quick sketches, you limit your values, limit what you have to explore. I think all these are really, really great. They look
Yeah,
like
that's awesome. That looks like
It's a
it's like a
whiteboard, I
graphic
think.
novel.
That's cool.
Yeah, these are absolutely fantastic. See, look, losing values. You drew your nice forms, but then it's lost into values, and this looks really fantastic. I like these a lot. I almost feel like you could like explore these a little bit more. I like these more than the final. Like the window here is a little bit separate, whereas this kind of hangs together more as a composition. I
Yeah.
would revisit this.
The pose too is really good on that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
fantastic
awesome.
work. We went over this. Nice, like losing values. But again, it's like kind of even where things are spaced, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and don't get too lost in like the kind of like constructing stuff like aspect of it, especially when you're composing. Like you building out the nose and showing that it's a box or whatever doesn't matter yet. And so don't get too stuck on that. Try think more about like what does it say if you tilt your head like this, or if you tilt it like that, or if you move it this way, you move it that way, or this, that. Think more in terms of like again, just like what is going to create like the mood or like the vibe that you want, rather than really particular little technical things.
Yeah, it's too much construction too early.
Yeah.
Ramon, what do you think?
Yeah, this is and it looks like this is this person's like very first time that they've done something like this. This is great. You can actually see that they're like they have a little path where they're like linking stuff together. I think the position that they chose for just for like for Juliet in general and like the kind of silhouetting, I'm assuming once they added value, like Romeo would likely be silhouetted here, and the other person slumped over. That's really effective. It's really effective to group like the slumped over figure and the reclining one together. I would say again, if you have a main rhythm, like a main path, see if there's offshoots of that, other things that can fan out from that can echo that, right? You have like a good core idea, so then like bite onto it and don't let it go. See if there's other ways that again, the room can be another character that's echoing what's happening with these characters. Also, just again, just a small thing, but one that's important. You can't really design that well to an aspect ratio if you are not going to take the time to actually like make the bounding line straight. Like, don't just like slap on like whatever for the boundaries. Like, maybe get a ruler or just slow down when you make the outsides.
Yeah, I think too much thinking about perspective. It's interesting, like again, how symmetrical it is, but then probably lower the camera angle, like get more of like a flat kind of effect. Um,
Yeah, again, make a little box, put some little people in it, like turn that around. The idea of like forming a heart out of elements like in the, in the composition is really smart. You just gotta like play around with it more. Turn it around a little bit more.
this feels like it's like cramped over to the right side. It's almost like, like everything's in a box and you turn the box and they're kind of sliding over onto the right side. Like move the camera a little bit, like get some, breathing room for them. I think you can get a little bit more gesture within the figures as well, but really great foundation. I just would kind of finesse it. I think it's almost there. Ramon?
Yeah, let me take a look at this one here. I think that's really interesting. Like there's a sort of like emotional intensity in like the two figures over on the right hand side, but I almost think like I don't know. There's like you got to watch out for some of that because it almost feels like she killed him. Like it looks like she's like kind of shaking him, and that's probably not exactly what you want. I think like the solidity of the figures and all that, like I think that's well worked out. The Grim Reaper, I think, is too on the nose. I think that's like just too obvious. So again, things like that work better if they're pretty subtle, right? Because people have seen that so much that it just becomes like it makes your work feel like less serious in that sense.
Somebody in the chat said the Reaper is giving I'm a head out, and that's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So like that's part of what you're contending with is like we have this bank of images that like all of us can draw upon, like memes and stuff like that, and so it's like if you make it too much like that, that's the only thing people are gonna see.
Yeah, too much thinking about like detail, like simplify. Think about, oh, I'm putting a line here. How does that divide the space? Like it's totally in three. So yeah, I think like think about that a little bit, and then you can get into like the perspective of things. But yeah, it's never too early to think about abstraction and composition.
Yeah. What is going on here? There's a bunch of like, there's battle scenes.
Oh.
That's pretty cool. Like, I think here, the one there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of chaos. I think that's pretty exciting. The main thing I would say is there's nowhere where the ground is flat, and so like everything's a little too curved. So like it feels like everything's sort of this kind of like fisheye lens. It does create this cool effect where it's almost like sort of like a swirl or like a spiral, like leading you, in the middle. But it leads you like right toward the middle, which is again a little too obvious, a little too even. Again, I would say like, get some little clay, move those things around, or even just in your head, try to rotate the scene so that you have a clear focus, like a specific thing that you can point to. You're like, this is the thing we're focusing on. This is what my story is about.
This next one, they finished later on. Yeah.
Oh, here.
Right there. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool. That's very mysterious.
Yeah, interesting take on this.
That's interesting. Wait, so who are those Romeo and Juliet down there? Like, are they like at a lake?
They gave a little context on the first one. Yeah.
Okay.
Romeo and Juliet dance around a lake at night.
Oh, another dance.
More Matisse inspiration. All the specter of tragedy. Okay, so it's like a manifestation, personification of tragedy.
Okay, in the environment.
I almost like the values here more. It's like because you got that big difference between light and dark. I would look to the sketch a little bit more. Other than that, like, yeah, this is tough because it's like, do you want to have naturalistic perspective? Because you want to I would go more graphic with it, like, symmetrical and then less perspective. I think it's more playing around with like this idea. It requires research because this is like, an unusual take.
Yeah, and if this is going to be kind of like the environment being like sinister, then maybe like the part of the environment that's like encroaching on them, maybe focus on having like scarier shapes, like pointier things. So maybe it's not going to like so gently have like a gradient going down into like where Romeo and Juliet are, but maybe it can feel like something that's like got claws that's like about to grab them.
And even just in this thumbnail, it feels a lot more like, oh God. Like that's
And I saw that you wrote on there that like you didn't have time to like render to show the values. You don't have to render it to show the values. Like, you know, when you're planning it, get used to like, even do it with markers or something, but get used to just like, if it's dark, just make it dark real quick.
You see in these whiteboard ones, it's just two values. All you need is two values, one or the other for thumbnails like this.
Yeah. Someone said Romeo, Juliet, and the Eldritch God watching them.
I really like the checkerboard that you did for the perspective. I think this is really cool. Just watch out for this tangent here. Look, triangle, perfectly tangent with this. Get this to overlap, just like this figure is.
BBL to get the overlap.
Yeah.
If the butt were bigger, that would happen. I like the slump though. That seems like actually pretty realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the poses are really nice. Yeah, look out a little bit for like I'm going to this, I'm going to this, I'm going to this. It's all kind of evenly spaced again. Try and stagger the way things are, you know.
Yeah, and if it's a procession composition, you can make it kind of longer. So like have like a bunch of figures leading up, and then there's like the final thing.
Bottom right's final, yeah.
Okay, these are cool. I like these. I think they all work really well as some like nice gesture. You got organized values. I would just like go further. I think these are nice.
That's cool. I like the mood board too. That's like a really good effective idea. Like,
oh, you did go further. Okay. Yeah, go simpler with your values. Too many values. Like you don't need like one, then the other, then the other. Make this all one value. Like this is using the budget too much. Really simplify again, like the whiteboard ones, one or the other. Then you could add more values. So zoom out mentally and actually while you're working. Because I think, you know, this looks nice. This is a little bit more clarified than this. And get rid of the lines too, so you can start, you know, seeing this as like values and light instead of lines. Ramon?
This is cool too. This is like, again, it feels like it's like a graphic novel or something.
Mm-hmm.
That long vertical one, number 3, that is just really intriguing. Like that looks kind of like you remember, Dev, like those Zorn paintings where it's like people on the train or like on like a, I don't know, I guess it's like a carriage or something, but it's like, you know, sunlight streaming in and like strips and stuff, and it's just like very like unusual points of view. It reminds me of that. I think the way the space is split up there is like, I don't know, it's just like really effective. I like having Juliet just kind of like clinging off of him. Number 4 is really cool too. That feels like very intimate, like having like one light, one dark. And like the way the spaces are divided is like, it's subtle, but they are like different sizes. Like that's really cool. These are like very poetic.
Cool exploration.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think thinking a little bit too much again about like figures, like try and not think about things, try and think about pattern and abstraction, and then add, you know, what you know about drawing figures on top of that. Switch into the other side of thinking. Just practice thinking more abstractly.
The body language for the figures is good. Like that last like kiss, like that actually feels like it. I don't know. It feels like, again, poetic in a.
That's great.
Yeah. But yeah, you don't want just like to plop them in there.
Things just feel a little like, you know, this then pinches in here and it pinches in here, and like you're losing a little bit of rhythm that you could get. But overall, like, the acting is great. We got here. We went to this. The same critiques apply, I think, and and then this.
That's the last one.
Oh, that's interesting.
I like this.
Who does that? That feels like.
You should read the caption too. This person apparently doesn't make art or doesn't draw much.
Recently gone into art. Never really started the lore. Yeah,
it's like
awesome.
This reminds me of like a Vrubel or something like that, where there's like such like a good taste of design to it, and they're not like caring at all about like, you know, being perfect about everything.
It has a little bit of that like sort of post-impressionist kind of feeling, like yeah, like a Vuillard or something like that. Like also the quality of like the white color in the clothes and like how they like this is actually really smart too, because having them wear like a similar color and bleed into each other, like Devin was saying, like combining values, like it is like them two like joining together and not even becoming like separate people, but like becoming one.
Yeah,
Like you can do a lot of stuff like that where it's like they just look like almost like one person, which is kind of the point of the story.
that's great. Yeah, I would say advice like for going further, like working on drawing is going
Yeah.
to give you more tools to make your compositions better. So, this is fantastic. And I think the more that you draw, the more, again, like the further you can take this stuff.
That just looks so good. Like even like small too.
Yeah, this is like, hey, this is my first try at art.
God damn. Oh man.
All right, you hit the end.
We did it. Oh,
Wow, look at that.
Thanks so much for coming in, guys. Do you
Yeah,
have
thanks for
any
having
like
us.
big closing, ideas about composition and practice?
I think like maybe another plug. I have let me pull it up. Super cheap, a couple of ebooks
On Gumroad, I'll put on screen.
creative.
Oh no, you have it here.
Yeah, there's two of them. Volume 1, Volume 2, $25 investment. It's going to go over a lot of the things that we talked about and some like the less commonly gone over ideas. So yeah, I think like if you're interested in diving in a little bit deeper, I think these are a good place to start. Also, there's like a light materials lecture. Ramon has a bunch of anatomy stuff here. My goal is like to have Underpaint be like, because people ask like where are good resources for this stuff. I'm trying to like compile things that it's only good information, hopefully. So yeah, this is where you can make like a little bit of dip your toes in, and then if you want to go deeper, there's recordings of 8-week classes, like hours and hours of more specific information. If you want to like, oh, I want to now go into value, well, here's 8 weeks on value, or like the emotional side of illustration, here's 8 weeks on that. Or I want to go into character design or visual development. And yeah, there's upcoming live classes, like it's a fall term. Mechs, getting into drawing every day is really kind of the focus of this class. This is like a Spider-Verse style art.
She's so good.
And yeah, Leia is fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome.
He's really, really good. Character art, he's really, really good at drawing. And yeah, our fundamentals class is like happening right now. If you want to catch the last class, that's tomorrow. And any of these classes, you sign up and you keep the recordings. You can watch them whenever, so you can go at your own pace and come back whenever you want to revisit something.
Yeah, we put a ton of work into this fundamentals class, and it really is the most complete fundamentals thing that we've seen. It's a lot of the stuff that we talked about in here. Just sort of like more systematically, but also leveraging like the points in common between like things like perspective and composition and drawing and anatomy and color and value and etc. So it's a condensed version of like our what is it like like our almost like 30 odd years of combined experience like working and teaching.
Yeah, and if you want to follow me, I post on Instagram, and I've been doing illustrations for Bungie's Destiny Grimoire books. There's a new one coming out soon if you want to pick that up. And then Ramon, do you have any new albums coming out?
Not yet, but we're working on it. But here I'll share also. So I've got I'm gonna do a bonus session of this here. This is the multi-figure narrative painting class. This one is basically the making of that painting that is behind me. So it goes over like actually this is from the class here. So I basically go over like pretty much everything that went into me making the painting, but also there's like a bunch of historical references, like, you know, talking about like reconstructing how people did stuff in the past. So if there are, and there's also like, you know, a bunch of, this is why making your own mannequin is a good idea. If you think mine's terrifying, look at like actual medical mannequins. They're awful. But in any case, like I found like just so much info on this stuff and like how people worked in the past and like, you know, going from like the really simple little pre-to-Rome sketches all the way to like their, you know, comprehensive drawings where they put it together to the final paintings. You know, got a bunch of examples like that. So if you're interested in seeing like how something like this gets done from end to end, then, you know, I think this is one of the few classes that actually takes you through that. And I've got some other specialty stuff like, you know, like a portrait painting, if you're interested in like oil painting or 19th century academic drawing or painting. All of this stuff is, you know, like heavily researched. It's pretty much, you know, if you're a Sargent fan or whatever, a lot of this is pretty much exactly what he was being taught. Yeah, and I'll have like a fall sale coming up soon. I also have a bunch of resources that are free. You can, you know, check out this 19th century database that I made. If you want references for figure drawing and stuff like that, this is a good place to go. They're organized by like studio, you know, and by school, and you can see a lot of work by different people and like their progression. And I also have images for download that are completely free. So, and a couple of articles. So you can go in here under free images, and like all of this stuff is stuff that you can download. Yeah. So yeah, you know, go ahead and check that stuff out. And if you have any questions, you know, you can find me on Instagram. I'll post like my my handles and stuff on the Discord and all that. So
it's all in the chat too. So everyone's got all the links.
Oh, cool. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, this is great, guys. Yeah, I really appreciate it, and you know, I think there's gonna be a lot more collaborations between us, and you know, in the future. So, yeah,
love it.
Cool.
Let me thanks, Pierce.
All right,
sweet.
These guys.
Thanks, everybody.
But
all right, guys. That's a stream. That's a stream. I'm not feeling super well today, so no DTI, no dress to impress. All right. Ramon and Devin, they're the best. They're the best. They taught me everything I know, so super cool to have them on here. I'm just reading the chat for a second here. Should we run a quick game of Rust, guys? Should we run a little bit of Rust? Just like a quick base build, quick AK get? Just kidding. I'm gonna go make a pizza. Oh, yeah. 1 second. Oh, I don't have the, 1 second. I got a little present for you guys. Which one is it? There we go. Let's go out in style. Oh, wait, I actually have something to talk about. Wait, I forgot. I probably just lost like half the viewers. We have one more challenge coming up, guys. There's new challenges now that everyone's left. Carmen made us really good renders. Let me share my screen here in a second. Let me pull it up. And I just added a ton of really awesome stuff into the Discord. So I made these new resources and reference areas here. So if you go up, if you can't see this section, if you go up to channels and roles and then browse channels, you can make sure they're ticked over here. I don't know why Discord does that. It's stupid, but you might have it. Carmen, we have these rendered reference now. Carmen just rendered us out like amazing references of all these classical sculptures. All these 19th century guys used to draw these in order to learn how to draw. So these are all free for you guys to use. Do whatever you want with. Carmen rendered them out, as a resource to us. And the models are from they're from some like museums and stuff like that. I don't know what the Creative Commons, don't go selling them, but yeah, please study from them. The next reference is gonna be one of these. I think it's a cheeked up Apollo. We wanted to have an option with something with a little bit of this going on, just by popular demand, not my demand, by popular demand. So I think we're gonna have an option of one of these, a front-facing one and a rear-facing one, and you guys can do whatever or both. And if you want critiques, I do feel comfortable critiquing that stuff, so I can probably do that. So without much further ado, my bad. 1 second. I'll announce that tomorrow. That's not even the right one. It's this one. Wait, no, it's not that one. Wasn't it on this one? Oh yeah, it was on this one? And then this one? I swear I made it full screen. How did I do that?